Wedding Photography 101. Over this full-length free video, we will go to a real wedding day behind the scenes and talk about everything from cameras and lenses to editing and delivering the final gallery. Oh, and I have a gift. If you'd like my wedding day shot list, a preset pack, and my wedding photography email templates all for free, you can get them below. Hello and welcome to Wedding Photography 101, your first wedding. We're going to go through everything that you need to know to photograph your first wedding. Who am I? I'm Taylor Jackson. I'm a wedding photographer, and I've been a wedding photographer for 20 years now. Although my friend Sam Hurd says to always say 9 years because you sound like you know what you're doing, but you don't sound old yet. In fighting with you, I've been doing this for a long time. I wrote a book in 2007, 2010, and I've just written another book. You can find it on Audible if you're interested. And as that title says, I have photographed over 1,000 weddings all around the world, primarily here at home. We'll talk about a little bit of the business structure, but if you're more interested in the business side of things, I actually have a full membership website with hundreds of hours of content. So if you're interested in going over there, you can sign up for the annual and you'll get instant access to downloads and resources as well as my online courses. So courses like Book More Weddings that are designed to really make this into a business, as well as contract downloads and downloads for welcome guides. So if you're interested in turning this into a business, that is the place to go. I do consider it to be an absolutely incredible resource for building both your wedding photography business as well as your dream life. If you're here just to photograph the wedding, if you've agreed to friends like, hey, you have a camera, you should shoot my wedding, and you don't care about the business side of things, that is what this here is going to be all about. So how wedding photography really changed my life? It has changed my life in a number of different ways. So when I was getting into it, the idea was primarily that I wanted a job that I could do and be somewhat location independent. I already had a camera, I was doing lots of concert photography as well as ski and snowboard and skateboard content, but that wasn't really paying the bills. I realized that if I wanted to make photography a career, that I would have to take the skills that I learned there and actually transport them into something that actually made money, like weddings. And as a concert photographer, there were so many parallels with photographing my first wedding, especially when it came to the reception, that it was low light, fast movement, and not so pretty venues. And in that description, both concert photography and your first few weddings are pretty similar. The thing that I realized pretty quickly is that they've set up something very nice for you to photograph, and you get to pick the time of day usually, that if you want to take the couple out for a sunset session, you can actually take them out over the good light part of the day, and you can create some incredible work. I think maybe the best part about wedding photography is that you're creating something that is immediately valuable for your couples and something that is valuable for the rest of their lifetimes that will be passed down. I think that is really, really darn cool. The money side of wedding photography is also pretty good. It's very profit heavy, and I have a lot of friends that are doing over $300,000 in sales. There's a course on the members website about doing hybrid, both photo and video coverage on a wedding day. And that is what has catapulted a lot of these careers from about maybe $100,000 up to something like $300,000. So the money is there. The job is fun 98% of the time. You're still gonna have those days that you're definitely getting the paycheck, or you just have those days where you're just not loving the overall experience for whatever reason. You will have those days, but I will say that once you start working with your ideal couples, and hopefully your first wedding is going to be with an ideal couple, so you get to see the best of the best. When you start working with them, the job it's the job that I would honestly be doing if I won the lottery. That if I didn't have to work for money, that I would be doing wedding photography for fun. And I know that might sound a little crazy, but it is actually what I feel, that I really truly enjoy doing this. I get to hang out with my friends, my second photographers, and I have to hire them to hang out with me, so I pay them money. And I'm sure that they enjoy that. And then also, when you become a preferred vendor at venues that you work at often, you kind of feel like you're going into not necessarily an office job. I got into wedding photography to escape ever having to have a 9-to-5 office job. But there are elements of that I miss, such as the community. And when you are a preferred vendor and you know a lot of the staff, or you know the sales team, or a bunch of the servers, you get to go in and you get to have a little bit of that 9-to-5, the good part of the 9-to-5, without actually having to be there from 9-to-5 and do a job that you don't really love. So to summarize, you're creating something of incredible value for your couples, for their families, that will be passed down from generation to generation, which is awesome. The money is there, and also the time freedom and flexibility is also there. And I know it might sound a little bit weird, but I definitely value having time freedom above all of the others. So selfishly, I guess I should say, I value the time freedom that I would rather have more time freedom and make less money than make more money but have no free time to myself. I very much do enjoy the work, but I also enjoy having the time and the freedom to do the things that I want to do in my lifetime. So maybe if you're doing your first wedding and you're thinking to yourself, maybe this could be a career, I encourage you to explore that if it seems like something that could be fun and interesting to you. It's definitely something that has changed my life completely, and without wedding photography, I don't know what I would be doing, to be honest, but I suspect what I would be doing would make me overall a little less happy, or at least that's how it felt when I was actually working those 9-to-5 jobs. Let's talk about gear next. So let's talk about some cameras and lenses right now. The lenses that I use have maintained pretty consistent from my actual first days, my first weddings, up until this year. I am typically on prime lenses and typically on 2 camera bodies as well. I think that it is critically important to have backups. So if you just have one camera right now, figure out a way to get a second camera, whether that is to borrow one or to actually rent one. Because if your main camera does go down, wedding days are long days, it is important to be able to finish the day with something that is not your phone. When it comes to camera bodies, the good news is that camera bodies have been very, very good since 2015, 2016, 2017. So even if you're shooting an older digital SLR, it will still be able to take great pictures for you. Most of my favorite images of all time were shot on cameras of that age, and I had no problems whatsoever with them. Now, moving into mirrorless, your life gets a little bit easier with eye autofocus. It makes your workflow on the day just a lot less stressful, as well as just higher quality images, I would say, with the newer glass. So if you're interested in what I'm using this current year, I have 2 cameras. I have a Sony a7 IV, which is right here. If I'm doing hybrid photo video coverage, this is the camera I'm using. And then I also have a Sony a7R Mark V, which is maybe a little overkill for weddings. You don't really need the high megapixels. So if you have a camera that's somewhere between, I would say, maybe 20 to 30 megapixels, that is more than good enough. You don't have to spend the money to get more megapixels for wedding photography. I find that most of my wedding photography, I am very rarely cropping. I'll do some straightening, but I'm very rarely cropping a new image from the image that I'm taking. I'm always just getting the shot as close as I can in camera. So I don't need a camera with additional megapixels. And we're also gonna be talking about camera setup in a few minutes. So a7 IV is kind of my main camera on the Canon side of things. An R6 Mark II would be a very, very nice to have. And if you're interested in my current recommendations, maybe drop a comment and I will let you know what I'm using if you're watching this video a little bit after it was released. For lenses, if you are shooting on Sony, this Tamron 35-150 f2 to f2.8 is expensive, but it is my favorite lens for wedding photography. It's not a budget lens, but if you can rent one of these for the day, they're very, very nice to have because they kind of do everything for the entire day. I'm okay with a 24-70. I like shooting prime lenses with really, really shallow depth of field. And a 24-70 just doesn't really give me that. If that's a lens that you prefer and you have access to it, by all means, it's great for wedding photography. It's super versatile, and especially in your first couple weddings. It'll help you out a lot because you're gonna be able to zoom around and get the shots that you need. But if you're like me and you really want that shallow depth of field, you find it very aesthetically pleasing, and that is important to you, prime lenses are kind of where it's at. This 85mm f1.8 for Sony is a very underrated lens. It's not the most expensive. You can definitely get more expensive lenses, but I think it is a lens worth having. Down in price point, you can also get a 50mm f1.8 pretty much for any system that you're shooting, and it will be pretty good. I would recommend getting one of these for low light reception coverage as well as details, even if you have something like a 24-70. As I spoke about before, backups to backups. So if you only have one lens, you gotta have a second lens when you go to the wedding day. So a 50 or an 85 is usually my main lens. And in my bag, I will also have a wide angle lens. So either a 35 or something like this Tamron 20mm f2.8 is also an incredible deal. Now, these are the things that I use. This doesn't have to be exactly what you use. There are no official rules to wedding photography. Aesthetically, I just really like the look of that shallow depth of field, and something like this 85 f1.8 does that for me. Or for ceremonies, the much more expensive and much more heavy 35-150 Tamron is an incredible tool to have. So those are some very useful lenses and cameras for your first wedding. We will be doing more on the camera setup, as well as when and where throughout a wedding day I will use these lenses coming up. Renting versus buying. So I rented lenses for a very, very long time. They were too expensive for me to buy. I wasn't really making a whole lot of money in wedding photography. So I would rent a lens like the 70-200 f2.8 because I knew that I wanted it. And also I knew that I wanted wedding photography to be my career. And the lenses I had were good, but a lens like that gave me a lot more quality, and I knew it was going to create images that would be in my portfolio for a lot longer. So I kind of saw every wedding as an opportunity to create something that was going to be beneficial for my portfolio years and years and years from now. And so even if I was making less money on those first weddings, I knew that I was going to be getting paid more because of the work that I was creating at them. So in that sense, I was very, very happy to be renting lenses that I otherwise could not have afforded. And I would recommend the exact same to you. That there definitely are lenses or budget lenses that are really good, like this 85mm f1.8, but there are also some lenses that just really aren't that great. And if that's what you have in your bag right now, it gets you through some family photos at the beach or whatever, that's awesome. But when it comes to wedding photography, if you do want to build this into a career, maybe consider upgrading that lens by renting for the weekend that you need it for. Another small life hack for this is if you do happen to know someone who is a wedding photographer and you're friends with them, you can potentially rent from them, but what I would recommend is actually hiring them for your first wedding if you can, so they can come out, they can have your back. And if you are friends and it's cool, and talked about this before, if you shoot the same system, maybe you'll be able to share some lenses. So you have the gear that you need, but you also have somebody that's got your back throughout the day. One note on renting, whenever you do, so a lot of it's mail order now and a Pelican case will show up, and go through everything and make sure it's all totally functional before the wedding day. I've had a few lenses that have arrived that the autofocus motors have made some weird noises, and it is much better to figure that out on the day that it arrives rather than the morning of the wedding. And if you live in a big city with a proper camera shop, there's a pretty good chance that they probably have a rental program as well. So you can go in and you can just get it in real life in person, which I do prefer if possible, just so you can see the thing before you actually leave the shop. That's all. Just rent lenses if you don't have them yet. Don't refinance your mortgage to buy gear if it's not going to be something that you're going to be using. And I would say wedding photography wise, there are a lot of specialized tools like an 85, 1.8, 1.4 that unless you're a portrait photographer outside of this, that you're probably not going to be using a whole lot again. So renting equipment is something that I would absolutely recommend. So on a wedding day, you need a flash. You need two flashes, as I mentioned before, backups in case something goes down. Fortunately, with newer cameras, the high ISO performance, so when you get into that low light, is actually pretty good. And you can surprisingly get away with not using a flash a lot of the time. To not bring a flash though, and to not be able to override bad lighting situations if you find yourself in them, is a problem for a wedding photographer. On the members website, I have a course called Off-Camera Flash for Wedding Photographers, and it goes through kind of my process for lighting scenes. I do my best to hide the flash, so I'm not using, there is a time and a place to do it. I'm usually not using just direct flash on someone. I'm usually bouncing it somewhere and creating a natural light source. There is a lot to talk about with that. So members website, if you're interested in that. For what I actually use, Lindsay has stolen my flashes. We have a studio. She has my flashes at the studio. I have two. They're Godox V1s, also called Flashpoint. It's on the screen here. They're kind of the same brand. They just call themselves different things in different markets. I don't necessarily need the power of a flash like that. And really any of the lower, more entry-level products are fine. And the nice thing with flashes is that they just kind of produce light, that the tech doesn't really change a whole lot, that sometimes they're circles, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they have this fancy little bounce card in the back here to put some light forward as well as up. But you absolutely do not need a $1,000 flash that any of these will get you by. And we're gonna talk more in a future video about how I actually use flash on my camera as well as a little bit off my camera, but if you wanna go more in depth, it is over on the members website. Next up, we're gonna be talking about the accessories that I bring on a wedding day. So I am incredibly minimal when it comes to what I bring on a wedding day. You've already seen my kit. It's 3 lenses, 2 camera bodies, that's it. And then I bring 2 flashes and also this light panel. You can get crazy and get a light stick if you really want to do some fancy colored lighting. This light panel right here will just make light of any color and pretty good intensity for how small it is. When I use this versus using a flash is usually in a more creative environment. If I'm using flash, I know that I need a lot of power. I need to really light a scene or somebody's kind of far away. If I can get close to people and I can be doing something creative with this, it's usually when I use this. Or get these little light sticks. You can get 2 of them. You can do some nice bylighting. Whatever creative dreams you want to execute on a wedding day, you can if you want it. I just bring this though. Next up my bag is a Peak Design Everyday Messenger. It is, I think, the smaller one, unless maybe they only make one now. Inside is where I put my second camera body with my wider lens on it. So my second camera will be in here with the 20mm lens or maybe a 24mm lens or a 35. And then I will have the larger ceremony lens, the 35 to 150 in the center. And then on this side, usually I'll have my flash and maybe an 85. I find that this gets me through an entire day. I do have some backup things in my car, such as light stands, in case I need to put something like this flash up in another corner somewhere far away. But most wedding days, I bring this and only this. I also try to keep the weight down because I don't really love to just leave my bag around. I like to kind of carry it with me when I can. Also, if you're working with a second photographer, this also includes a laptop slot as well. So you can put your laptop in there and maybe a hard drive. So at the end of the night, you can just download cards to your hard drive so you don't have to leave the wedding day with your second photographer's cards. So yeah, that was an underwhelming accessories. I thought I'd have more tricks to show you. Unfortunately, I have a light panel and a bag and an extra battery, and that's it. Bring a charger too. But that can stay in the car. Also, if you have a cell phone charger with a USB-C out, you're able to actually charge most newer cameras via that. So you don't have to bring a charger and charge your batteries. I will also say that maybe at most I'm going through 2 batteries in a wedding day. If I see a 3rd battery, maybe that means it's a 16-hour wedding day. So a backup battery is a very nice thing to have, as well as bringing a charger on the wedding day. Camera setup. So we're all gonna have different cameras, so I'm not gonna walk you through the exact menu system of this specific camera. I'm going to talk to you about the things that I change on any camera. Number 1, I am always shooting in RAW plus JPEG. So plus JPEG is kind of my backup process. So when I get home from the wedding day, I just drag all of the JPEGs to offsite backup. So at least I have some backup within an hour of getting home from the wedding day. The RAW is what I will edit everything from. Now, where RAW comes into play is that it allows you to have access to data that you don't see. So if you overexpose something or you underexpose something, you have a lot more leverage in there in order to get an image and to rescue that image. And as wedding photographers, we find ourselves basically shooting contrasting color palettes every day. So there's usually a white dress and a black suit, or maybe a white suit and black suit or whatever. There's a lot of contrast between outfits usually on the wedding day. And if you're using any sort of automatic settings, sometimes that might trip your camera up. So number 1, RAW. Number 2, if your camera has 2 card slots, which I do recommend as a main camera for wedding photography, make sure you're shooting the RAW images to both of those cards so you have redundancy and backup in your camera. When it comes to autofocus settings, this will again depend on your camera. I am usually shooting autofocus continuous, and I'm actually using on mirrorless, I'm using all of the points. So you may see online that some people prefer to have a little tracking box and then you just basically put the box over the person you want to track. I find that I am much happier just allowing the camera to make its own decisions, knowing that I can quickly either tap the back screen to override, or the other method is kind of a focus and recompose, so I can focus on the thing that I want to be focused on and half press and come back into the scene, and the focus will remain on that person that I focused on. I have face and eye detect always enabled on my cameras, although I do have a button on the back here if I need to disable it. Some cameras will call it kind of a product showcase mode where it will just ignore the person. It's kind of built, I think, for YouTube, I guess, that if I'm trying to show you a product, that my camera, it doesn't care about this, it sees a face in the scene. But if you set that product showcase button, all of a sudden, it'll actually focus on the camera like it's doing right now. To have that override is nice to have if you do have face and eye detect on your camera. DSLRs mostly will not have that feature, but mirrorless cameras, most of them do. If you do have different RAW settings on your camera, I have no problem shooting wedding days in a compressed RAW format. So there's usually a lossless, non-compressed format, and the files will be really, really big. I have found that I've never really missed out on quality that I've needed by shooting a compressed format. What this does is allows your cards to go a lot further on the wedding day. I do my best to never have to switch cards on a wedding day. So I will use larger cards like 128 gigabytes or even 256 gigabytes to know that I'm going to have all the data that I need in my camera. The most likely point that you're gonna have an issue with a card is the time that you are actually pulling it out of the camera or putting it back into the camera or putting it in a card reader. So the less you can do that, the better. So on a typical wedding day, if I'm shooting a camera that is roughly maybe 24 megapixels, I'll usually be shooting maybe 64 gigabytes, but I like to have more space on my cards so that I'm not getting nervous kind of coming into the reception being like, oh, I should shoot more on my second camera body because I don't want to swap my cards. On all of my cameras, regardless of brand, I will set up a button to switch my camera from full frame mode into APS-C crop mode. If you're using an APS-C crop camera, you might not be able to get more reach out of this, but basically what it does, it turns my full frame camera into a crop sensor camera. So you lose some megapixels, but you get more reach. So if you're using something like this 50mm f1.8 and you hit that button, all of a sudden, whatever the math is on 1.5 times 50, probably 75. That means that you kind of have a 50mm lens, it can turn into a 75mm lens, or if you're shooting a 35, it can turn more into a 50, or an 85 can turn into whatever the math is on that. Now, when it comes to what mode I shoot my camera in, For a long time, I was always shooting in full manual mode, which means that I had full control over my ISO. I wasn't shooting automatic settings in ISO, and I had to set everything exactly as I wanted it to. In digital SLR, I think that this is still good practice. On mirrorless, now that you can see exactly kind of the image that you're taking, I don't think it makes as much sense. So now I'm a little bit happier to shoot on Aperture priority with auto ISO, but we're gonna talk a little bit more about that in a dedicated section once we've talked about Aperture and ISO and shutter speed. If you are renting a camera to use, make sure that you test that camera out and you make sure that everything's looking good and you've tested those files on your actual computer before going to the wedding day. And while I've given you some suggestions here, I would definitely recommend finding a YouTube video for your specific camera and seeing how others set it up. There might be some hidden things in there that make your life a little bit easier. So that is my camera setup. It's pretty relaxed, I would say overall. I don't really change a whole lot. The number one thing that you have to do, make sure you're shooting raw. It will save you in times that you need the saving. And next up, we're gonna talk about what makes a good wedding photo. Let's talk about building your own style. So how do you find your style? I believe that you can actually build your own style with intention. I don't believe that style is something that's just gonna magically find you in the evening time, that you're gonna be having dinner and all of a sudden you're gonna be like, this is what I need to do. I don't think that it's like that. If it was for you, amazing. But I would say for pretty much every artist and every photographer that I know, it's more of a process of collecting the images and the things that you like to look at and starting to create almost the average of that product. So everyone's not gonna have the exact same images that they like to look at, but when you put all of those together, all from different photographers, please resist the hesitation, just copy one individual and try to be them. But if you are collecting a number of images, you can do this on Pinterest, just add a bunch to your board, and you build that library for yourself. As soon as you start creating a little bit of work that's kind of that average, so maybe you're taking bits and pieces from here and there, maybe you take a little bit from Gabe where you really like kind of the dark and moody, but then also you really like how Jose Villa has those real nice film tones and nice greens, you can start to build your profile based on the things that you like. So I think step one, start collecting all the work that you like and almost immerse yourself in it. This means following everybody on Instagram and really just kind of opening your eyes every single day and being hit with the inspiration that you want to create something similar to. And then actually getting out and creating it. I think that this is the hardest part for a lot of us, that if you do want to make this into a career, you have to go out with intention and start creating the work. Again, maybe this is above scope if you're just here for your first wedding, but if this is going to be a pathway you're going to go down, your first wedding is the first piece of that. In the beginning, all of the first weddings that you shoot are so critically important to your portfolio and the direction of it. So if this is something that you'd be interested in pursuing, I already respect your commitment to being this far into this video and really understanding what it is that you want to create, because your first wedding is going to be an incredible opportunity to start that process. One thing I will say in terms of building a style is that if you are shooting weddings that maybe aren't the exact style that you would like to be going after in the future, it is important to find the elements of the weddings that you're going to that can fit your portfolio now, that don't disconnect from your ideal couple. In the beginning, I shot it was pretty much all my friends were in the music industry and they were all getting married. So they wanted a photographer that basically shot everything like band promos. And if I went to a very traditional wedding and shot some very traditional photos and had them in my portfolio, it wouldn't really attract more of that music style of couple. So what I did is I knew I needed to build more content. So what I did is I got my friends in Converse and non-traditional wedding dresses, and we went out and we found areas in town that really no other wedding photographers would be shooting. It was all like band promo locations that I would use for bands. And we would just go to those same locations, but just in different wardrobe. And that's how I started building my portfolio and attracting the style of couple that I really like to work with every single weekend. So know that your style is just not gonna find you. It's a collection of all the things that you like, finding that average and making the opportunities happen for yourself. And don't get discouraged when you see other people creating amazing work and you're like, that's so far beyond the realm of what I will be capable of. Know that it will be something you will be capable of. It just takes the time and effort to put into building your ideal portfolio before those opportunities start to unlock themselves naturally. We'll also be doing some editing in this as well. And I do think that even though style has a lot to do with the day and the lens choice and your eye as a photographer, the color palette can be done in editing. So if you're looking for that Jose Villa film tones, that's something that you can build a little bit more in post. You still need that nice light and you need to be selective over what images you actually put in your portfolio. But some of the color palette can be done in post-production. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Finding good natural light. So I'm going to talk a lot more about this once we're actually on camera at the wedding day. But for me as a photographer, what really makes an image is good lighting that people look good and feel good in. If it's bad lighting, if it's direct sun, people, even if it's an incredible composition and the photo's amazing, they're not going to like that image as much as they should. So I am very conscious to first create images that people feel great about themselves in, and then second, kind of everything else. Natural lighting is the way that I light pretty much all of my images throughout the wedding day. And even if you're in a lighting environment that seems like it's not good, there's usually a way to use that light in a way that your couple will be happy with themselves, or that the subject of the image is going to be happy with themselves. Throughout the wedding days, you're going to see that I really kind of find good light and I stay there. So if there's, for instance, we're doing candids and it's cocktail hour, if they're out in the bright sun and the sun is directly above them and everybody's got dark shadows under their eyes, I'm not going to hang out there. I'm going to hang out under the awning where maybe people are getting drinks at the bar, and I'm going to spend more time there in good light rather than photographing the bad light. When it comes to the couple session, you are much more in control of that. You can bring them where you want them to go. Open shade is always kind of my go-to. So if you have a big tree somewhere, or it's late enough in the day that maybe the building is casting a nice shadow, I am always in that open shade rather than trying to photograph in bright sun. Once it gets to be around sunset, that's when we usually go out and get more photos in the direct sun. Pretty much all of my images I am shooting backlit if I am in that environment, so I'm never really front lighting my couples. You can do it, you just have to wait until almost after sunset, or like the last little bit of sunset if you are having somebody look directly at the sun and you want them to feel good about themselves in that photo. You'll notice that, for instance, a lot of models can take that really harsh light very, very well. But then a regular person put into the same lighting situation looks not good, and there are better ways to light it. So one of the easiest things I do when I walk into a space, I walk into a room, or I'm just outside, is I'll actually fire up the selfie cam and I just go for a little spin. Usually there's one direction, so if you spin all 360, there's usually one direction that your selfie cam is going to show you a much better looking photo of yourself. And that is where you want to put the couple. So I'll go in, I'll do a quick little scout like that, and I'll figure out where they need to go. And that includes things like under trees. So you're under a tree, there's nice open shade. There's usually one direction of light under that tree where it's going to look the absolute best. So go in, experiment on yourself very quickly and figure out where that spot is, and then bring the couple into it quickly. You can also just use your hand and figure out when it starts to look good, but I find that looking at myself in that light gives me a much better idea of what a normal person is going to look like when put in that scene. If you absolutely cannot find good natural light, and there's just no way, I will say on record that I've done a lot of weddings and I've never been put into a scene where I couldn't do anything with the light. There's always a way to figure it out. There's always something that you can do to give the couple the best light possible. If you are in the worst condition, which I would consider to be in a field, in the middle of a sunny day, the 12 noon sun directly on top of everyone, the best thing that you can do in that situation is have people turn away from the sun. So even if the sun is directly above, there will be a direction where you can face them, that at least their face is going to be a little bit in the shade. And even if that means if they have white or gray hair, it might start to turn to white and overexposed. But if you're able to get their face in that little piece of shade, even though they're in the hot sun, but their face is in the shade, they're going to feel a lot better about that image, rather than having everyone face into the direct sun and having everybody be a little squinty. They're just not gonna look their best. If you're nervous about lighting, I would say to go to the place that you're going to be doing photos for your first wedding at the time you're going to be there on a sunny day. Sunny day is usually worst case scenario. If it's cloudy, everything is nice, everything is shade. You can basically point your camera in any direction. But if it's sunny, that's when it's going to be a little bit more challenging. So go out by yourself, or maybe bring somebody to do a few test photos with if you are really, really nervous about it. But I would say even if you can get to the photo location 10 minutes early on the day and see exactly what the weather is doing, and you're not going to spend all this time worrying about things that might not even be. So if you're worrying for 2 weeks leading up to the wedding that it's going to be sunny and you have nowhere to do photos, and it ends up being cloudy on the day, you just spend all those hours worrying for no reason. So don't stress too hard, and do the best you can in the scene with the couple, knowing that the better you can make them look regardless of the background. I will always choose good light on the couple over the background. And sometimes this is a bit of a difficult conversation if a couple's like, well, we really want this beautiful church in the background. I'll do that shot, but I'll do it a little bit wider. I find that the wider your lens goes, the more it's going to hide that bad light. But for the actual close-ups of my couple, we will be facing a different direction, and one that is giving them the best light possible on their face. This section is going to be about aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. They are the three things that make up something called exposure. And they do make a little bit of a triangle, so if you increase one, well, let's talk about it. Aperture is number one. Aperture is the number that you're usually going to be seeing on these lenses, so you'll see the focal length. So f1.8 is the aperture, and that means the light that it allows through. It's not a great example because when you take them off the camera, they just go down to f22. But if you were to look through an older lens where you could manually control the aperture, you would see that when you're at 1.8, it's letting a lot of light in. Pretty much the entire lens is just open. And as you stop it down to f22, the hole gets smaller and smaller and smaller. When you're at f1.8 or 1.4, or whatever the smallest number your lens goes down to, you're gonna get the most shallow depth of field in that setting. So what I will do a lot of the time is I'll actually shoot with my camera in aperture priority mode, which basically just allows me to set my lens like that. It's called wide open whenever you're at the minimum aperture. And aesthetically, that's the look that I really like. You are getting shallow depth of field, so as I get closer to the camera here, you'll see that the background is a little bit more out of focus. When I'm on a wedding day, if I know that there's somebody kind of here that I also need in focus, that is when I will do something called stopping down. And what that means is making my aperture a higher number, maybe f4 or f5.6. Aperture is also a little bit contingent on your distance from who you're focusing on. So if I'm on an 85mm lens and you're 100 feet away from me, and I focus on you, I'm not gonna get that nice background separation, but as you get closer to the camera, the closer you get, the more out of focus that background's going to be. One of the reasons that I like prime lenses is because it allows you to get that really shallow depth of field, so you can shoot at 1.8 or 1.4, whereas zoom lenses will usually start at f2.8 or maybe f4. So your aperture's open nice and wide, it's letting lots of light through. That means your shutter speed is going to have to be a little bit higher in order to compensate for that. So if you're out in the bright sun or you're in an environment like this, you're letting so much light through the lens, you are going to have to go up in shutter speed in order to compensate for that. Next up, shutter speed. So if you're using aperture priority, so you're setting what you'd like your f-stop to be, you are allowing the camera to actually control your shutter speed. There are definitely circumstances that if you go out in the bright sun, that the shutter speed might not be able to get high enough in order to not make the image overexposed. If you're shooting a lens that's an f1.8 and you're outside, most cameras should be able to get a high enough shutter speed that it's pretty close. But if you have a more expensive lens like an f1.2, there are going to be situations when you might have to come down to f1.8 in order to not overexpose the scene. There are also, they're called neutral density filters. They're basically filters that go on the front of your lens that are like sunglasses. So if you really do want to be shooting at f1.2 outside, you may have to get one of these filters in order to let a little bit less light into the front of the lens. So if you're set to aperture priority mode and you're going outside and you're looking at the back of the screen and it's way too overexposed, that means you have to stop down. With my aperture priority mode, I also do something called auto ISO. So ISO is essentially your, I guess we'll say it's the sensor's sensitivity to light. So it used to be in the film days that an ISO 800 film would be a lot more sensitive to light than an ISO 400 film. And there's different stops in math. But now with digital, rather than having to choose the film that you want to put in, you just get to use all the ISOs. So I run auto ISO if I am in aperture priority mode. And what that means is it's going to give me the best combination. You don't got to learn the exposure triangle, but it's usually going to give me the best setup for that scene. So if things get a little bit dark, your ISO is going to come up a little bit on your camera in order to not get too slow of shutter speed. So high shutter speed, that's fine, you're freezing the motion. But as you get into lower light environments, if you notice that your shutter speed is going down to things like maybe 1/40th of a second, you're going to start getting a lot of camera shake. One other thing to keep in mind is the general rule for this is that whatever your focal length is, so if you're on this 50mm lens, you should be shooting at least 1/50 or higher. This will make sure that you're not introducing any camera shake. That said, if you are on a 35mm lens and you're at 1/30th of a second, that's a very slow shutter speed and somebody walking in the frame will actually be blurred, or if you're photographing a speech and they're moving or talking, you'll start to notice a little bit of blur in the image. So my personal preference is to stay around 1/80th of a second or higher. And in your camera settings, you should be able to tell your camera that when you are in auto ISO mode to not allow the shutter speed to go below 1/80th of a second. So that is the easiest way to get exposure correct. You don't have to learn to shoot manual. Shooting manual is nice to learn over time, but I don't think it's a requirement anymore. If you do end up on the members website and doing the hybrid photography course, I would encourage at that point to start learning manual, because in video, in photography, a white dress gets a little bit closer to a camera. Your photo is going to basically compensate for that, and it's no big deal. There's a bunch of still images, it's fine. They'll all be cohesive and nice in post-production. But if you're shooting aperture priority in video and something that either a black suit or a white suit get really close to the camera, your aperture priority is going to compensate for that. And in video, those exposure changes in a video don't look so good. So if you are interested in eventually doing video, maybe begin the process to shoot manual. But if you're just doing photography, I think aperture priority is more than good enough. Now moving into flashes, some of your flashes will have something called TTL. And in terms of settings, if your camera and your flash all working together, TTL is basically just measuring what's coming through the lens, TTL is through the lens, and adjusting your flash power appropriately. I personally shoot on manual flash mode all the time. This doesn't have to be something that you do. TTL is more automatic and a little bit easier. What I like to do is shoot on manual and just have full control over it. This allows me to do what I like to do with flash, just kind of hide it in the scene rather than have it overpower everything. If you're shooting aperture priority and you're letting the camera make a lot of decisions and also flash decisions, the images will come out properly exposed, but they just might look a little bit too flash heavy. Again, this is personal preference. I like to shoot on manual, so I'll just be cycling on the back here. There's a little wheel, and you're able to set your flash power up and down. It becomes pretty natural. You know that if you walk into a scene, there's a high ceiling, maybe your flash power goes up a little bit. And then if you come into somewhere with a bit of a lower ceiling, you'll know that you have to go down in power a little bit. I'm always bouncing my flash. We'll talk about this more throughout the course. But unless it's the exact look that I'm going for, I'm not shooting it like this at you. I'm going to be bouncing it somewhere up here. So if the light is coming from here, it looks like a more natural way to light a scene rather than just lighting it direct. There is definitely a time and a place for both, but I would say overall, if I had to put it in percentages, 80 to 90% of my day is pointing my flash off a white ceiling or maybe finding a wall that I can bounce it off of. Again, more of that in the off-camera flash for wedding photographers course over on the members website. All right, let's talk about posing. This is a post that I did for the member site some time ago. I do weekly content over there whenever it's possible. Otherwise, all the courses, if you're a member, you get access to all the courses and they keep appearing for you. So there's a lot of text in the actual post. I'm going to walk you through what I do on typical sessions. So say I have a couple, we arrive, say it's an engagement session, which is even more awkward. Wedding day, a little less awkward because you kind of know like the wedding photos are part of the day. Engagement session is just the three of you going out and taking pictures, and it's a bit strange always. I begin by having people walk. So the first thing I'll do, hold hands, take a walk that way. I'll get a photo of the back of the dress, which is on the shot list that we're gonna talk about a little bit here. And then at some point I'll tell them, turn around, come back towards me, and I'll just have them smile and face each other. I'm not having them face the camera, I'm not doing anything crazy yet. I'm simply just having them walk away. They get far enough away, they turn around, they come back. This is from an 85, I think. I'm typically on an 85mm lens at this point, or maybe a 50, to give them a little bit of space so that I can get a little bit closer. As I mentioned, I'm pretty introverted, and I find it very weird to be very close to my couples and taking pictures of them. So a 50 or an 85 is a more comfortable place for me. So I'll have them turn around, walk, come towards me, and at some point I'll be like, can you just like hug an arm or get really close together, or even put an arm around each other and just get nice and close together. After this, I will usually stop them and have them put an arm around each other and smile and face the camera. I will be completely ready for this photo when I ask them to do it, that I'm not gonna have them standing there for too long smiling and facing the camera and becoming uncomfortable. It's very much, they're walking, they have an arm around each other, they just stop kind of where they're at, and they just smile and face towards me, take like 3 photos, and then we continue on somewhere else. I'll also typically photograph if we're going somewhere, we're doing something, I'll kind of photograph all along the way. When they're walking away, I'll also have them stop and kiss. And then I'll also do some things where they kind of hold hands and spin in a circle, or something a little bit more artistic if I have the time. If I don't have the time and I have 5 minutes for the entire photo session, I will simply do the hold hands, walk that way, turn around, come back towards me, look at each other while you walk, hug an arm while you walk, arm around each other while you walk, stop, smile and face the camera. And I will get that at a few different distances. So if I'm on a prime lens, I'll just kind of take a few steps back, I'll get a few different shots. I'll be moving with them while they're walking, I'll be accelerating away or getting a little bit closer. So they get a lot of different variations very quickly. If they have some sort of set or ceremony space that they've set up, I will also have them in that space, kind of doing the same thing. And in this case, I simply had them hold hands and smile and face each other. Then right after that, I'll ask them to smile and face towards me. Then I'll ask them to put an arm around each other and get really nice and close. And then you get 3 variations of a similar shot that all feel a little bit different. So you can either shoot those all at one focal length, or you can move around a little bit and get some variations. Another simple one is to ask for a forehead kiss. Usually that unlocks some sort of real emotion for a second. I would say always be ready to go. As soon as you tell the couple what you want them to do, be ready to photograph it, because usually within the first, not even, I would say maybe even half second to 1 second, that's all the best emotion from that. Or when they feel like the photo's already done and they've relaxed, those are kind of the two spots that I get the best emotion. Hand placement is also something that I very much look for, that I don't want to have people just with hands dangling down at their sides. It doesn't look very good. Having hands on shoulders or hands on elbows really kind of brings things together and makes the image feel a heck of a lot more complete. This hug works sometimes. You can try it. 25% of the time it works every time. The other times it feels like prom. So if it works for you, it works for you. If not, that's fine. This is another example of kind of the just hug an arm and just be close together there. I will also tell all of my couples when we first meet and we first begin walking that I'm not going to pose them like every single limb for every single photo, that we're basically just going for a walk. I want you to be happy with one another, stay close together, hold hands, have arms around each other. If you have ideas for photos, by all means jump in and we can put them together. And then I assure them if they're doing something weird, I'll let them know. But otherwise, like, let's just go and have fun. And with that speech at the very beginning of the shoot, usually all of these images are a lot more organic and natural. And my main goal is to have my couples feeling completely normal as fast as possible, which is a bit weird because I'm obviously there with the camera. But the faster they can get in that headspace and just be normal and comfortable, the better images that I'm going to get. Another easy one, regardless of where you're at, you can always ask your couple to dance or practice your first dance. Some couples, they actually want to practice their first dance and it's helpful. Other times it just unlocks some nice emotion. And it kind of works regardless of how the thing goes. If one of the partners doesn't like to dance, the other one does, that's a funny shot. If they both like to dance, that's great. If they both feel very uncomfortable with that direction, it's very visible that they're not the people that are gonna dance for you, you can lay into that awkwardness and you can just have them just hold a hand and just stand kind of American Gothic style, just like not even smiling, just facing the camera. And you can get a shot that definitely maybe wasn't what you were after, but definitely fits the vibe of the couple a lot more. I will also say a weird thing with my posing is that I've found that the less times I change lenses or cameras, the better. So I will typically, at least for a photo session, I won't change lenses. I'll either have a 50 or an 85 on my camera and I will not change that. Maybe I'll use 2 cameras, I'll do a few different shots, but I do my best to keep things moving and to not focus too hard on what I'm doing back here, or changing lenses and kind of slowing down the pace of the shoot. This also means that I am not setting up any lighting for the most part. I'm pretty much natural light when we're outside. There's nothing wrong with setting up lights, but it definitely slows down the process. And if your couple is uncomfortable a little bit to begin with, it's very difficult to also do off-camera lighting with them and to have them be natural in themselves if you're taking a couple minutes to set up each shot and leaving them in a pose. So pull the bits and pieces from this that seem like they would make sense to you. I do find that just movement gets couples really being themselves very quickly, and that is my #1 goal. Coach them in the beginning, tell them that, hey, we're going out taking some photos, be smiley, be happy with each other, hold hands, push each other around if you want to push each other around, and that you'll tell them if they're doing anything weird. But otherwise, you're not going to step in, you're not going to pose them like a school photo with their like knee up on a bench and smiling and chin up and over. You're not going to do that type of stuff because it's just not natural, it's just not comfortable for anyone, myself included as the photographer. I don't want to be doing that to other adults. It makes the images feel a little bit more unnatural, a little bit more stiff, and if you can break that, that's how I get images I like personally. Before the wedding day, 1 month out, I'm going to assume at this point that there's been an agreement that you figured. Also, even if it is a friend, still have a contract that outlines deliverables. There's a contract on the members website. I would say critically important, especially if it is a friendship. I really want to make sure that with my clients, I'm on the same page in terms of deliverables, and I think it's even more important if it's a friend. I don't want to see friendships get a little bit weird because they thought that you were also doing full rolling video coverage of the ceremony and you weren't. So having that all in the contract is, I would say, a very important thing. I will also assume that maybe you've, whether they're a friend or not, maybe you've accepted a little bit of money for this deal. And my personal preference is to do 50% of that payment up front and 50% of it 2 weeks before the wedding. So now that we're sitting in this kind of 1 month before the wedding period, I like to give them a reminder that, hey, by the way, final payment is due on this specific date. but I also want to get in touch to essentially kind of walk through the day with them. That some people might have a final schedule-ish of the day, and that's usually what I ask for. It's like, it doesn't matter kind of where it's at, I just like to have an idea of the day so I can kind of mentally walk through everything. I'm mostly just looking for any red flags that might exist, that if they just don't have time for family photos, that's something that I need to kind of let them know about now before they actually finalize the schedule. In terms of what I need, and we'll actually go through the wedding day and talk a little bit more about this, but in terms of what I actually need on a wedding day, I would say if it's your first wedding, if you have 45 minutes with the couple, you're going to get a lot of really great images with that. If you have maybe a half hour additional with that with the wedding party, also great. And then for family photos, I do this in a bit of a different way, I guess. So I actually ask the couple for a list of the family photos that they want. And I think that this is really important, especially if it's your first wedding, because it really streamlines the process that I have discovered, especially when I am less than confident in my early days. I'm introverted and shy, and it's very difficult for me to control an audience and like yell at people to get them into a space. So having that list really helped me out. I would ask for the list to be given to myself as well as somebody else that knows who all of the people are. So I would usually rely on them to actually yell out names so I could just focus on taking the pictures. And that makes that part of the day go as fast as it can possibly go. One thing that happened to me a lot, especially in my younger years before I was the same age as my couples, when you're like 5 years younger than your couples, I found it even more challenging. But someone would kind of come in and start directing the family session. So if you didn't have a list, they would come in and they'd be like, oh, we should do this photo. And they would start putting groups together that maybe the couple, that wasn't a priority, that the priority is their immediate family. And then they want to get to cocktail hour and they'll do the rest over the reception. If someone steps in and all of a sudden starts directing this, it's very difficult for them to just be like, hey, Aunt Rose, stop this madness. Let's get the photos of the parents and let's get out of here. So if you can kind of diffuse that situation before it happens, I would highly recommend it. So ask your couples for photo list. For my actual photography list of the day, as well as kind of the usual combinations that I get, there's a PDF of that as well. You can modify it or you can just print it out as is to bring to the wedding. So 1 month before the wedding, I'm getting in touch just to remind them that, hey, keep me in the loop of things. Remind them of that final payment that's upcoming. I would almost 100% recommend getting the final payment before the wedding day. Some couples in the early days of my business had some pushback. They're like, we'd rather just pay you on the wedding day. And I agreed to it, and it's just always an awkward way to leave. If you do have to accept payment on the wedding day, make sure that it's taken care of early in the day, that there's a check or there's cash in an envelope for you when you arrive. Because I found some of the most awkward experiences in my career when I'm leaving and being like, by the way, can you pay me now? And they're in party mode, they want to have fun. And I hate for that to be the last point of contact in real life, or following up after the wedding to ask them for money before I release the images. It's just a really not great situation to be in. So if you can say that it's your policy to get paid up front, or if it's a friend that you're doing the wedding for, say that you're using all the money to rent lenses so you can have the best of the best gear for their wedding, they'll be hopefully a little bit more understanding. But moving forward, if you do decide to make this a business, I would say make sure that you get your payments up front, because it does get awkward to chase people down after the wedding or on the wedding day when they're like opening envelopes in front of you. Just not a great experience. So get paid up front if you can. Members also have access to all my email templates as well. So if you're interested in seeing exactly how I communicate, you can do that. So 1 month out from the wedding, typically that email will be responded to with a, hey, thanks for getting in touch. We're working on the schedule, we'll let you know. And then usually 2 weeks before the wedding, I will get in touch again to make sure that the final payment's going to be set through, or if you are doing something automated and they just get invoiced, then hopefully all of that has already worked out for you. Moving into the 2-week window is usually when I'll get a mostly final schedule. I don't need a final schedule of what every single element that's happening on the wedding day. I don't need to know when the florist is arriving and when the DJ is there to set up. I pretty much just need kind of a high level overview of the wedding day. This includes locations that I have to be at, including getting ready locations. I double, triple, quadruple verify that. And I also ask for cell phone numbers of people that will be at both of those locations in case I need to find them. Moving forward from that, I will be looking for a ceremony location and address, and also the time. I will go into Google Maps and make sure all the math works out in terms of travel and in terms of the time that I'll need for getting ready. If I have, I would say maybe an hour and a half of getting ready coverage, I am more than happy. And then I do my best to get to the ceremony maybe 45 minutes before the ceremony is scheduled to happen, so that I can actually get into the space and also start to get candidates as guests begin to arrive. Next up, if we are going somewhere off-site for photos, I do my best to kind of maybe not push complete. If it's something that your couple wants to do, great, go do it. But I find that if I can do all the photos, specifically for family photos, at the ceremony space or at the reception space, workflow wise, it usually works out a little bit better than trying to get everybody in cars and then to a park that one person's gonna get lost or whatever it might be. If you can do them on site, speeds the family photo process up a lot. I don't mind going to a photo location with a couple and maybe the wedding party, especially if they have a limo, it makes it easy. Depending on logistics of the day, you can either hop in the limo with them or you can drive yourself. If you're in a downtown core, it's usually easier to go with a couple, so you don't have to park and figure all that out. And then you're just there and ready to go. Sometimes this means you have to Uber back to your car at the end of the night, which is a bit of a bummer, but sometimes that's just kind of how it works out. So when I see that there's an offsite location, I want to verify that they have a permit for that if they need a permit for it. If you're a smaller city, usually there's no permits needed. Bigger city, more likely that you will need a permit for it. I just like to make sure that the couple knows that if there is a permit required, that they know that in advance rather than showing up on the day. From there, reception, address, and timing for that. And usually I'll get a little bit more of a breakdown. For the ceremony, I don't really need kind of a play-by-play. It's like if the ceremony begins at 1 and ends at 2, that's fine, I'll be there. For the reception, I like to have a little bit more detail in terms of when the couple is going to be introduced into the reception. Again, I want to get there maybe 40 minutes before, 45 minutes before if I can, to make sure that I get reception details as well as people as they start to arrive. I do like to get that room shot with nobody in it if possible. And usually there's a small window for that before guests start to arrive. After that, I just like to have kind of an organized list of that, okay, we're gonna do, some of my couples do the first dance before dinner. I like to know that if they're being introed, they're coming in and they're going to go right into their first dance and maybe the DJ is gonna change the lighting. I want to know about that so I can kind of figure out what that looks like for myself and my camera prior to it actually happening in real life. For me personally, I guess this is different if it's a friend that you're photographing your first wedding for, but if it is not a friend and it's just a stranger, I don't love to sit at tables with other guests. I will do it, it's fine. I think this also comes to my introverted brain that I find it very difficult to communicate with people all day. And then my recharge time is kind of when I get to sit down for dinner. I'm not setting up any shots, and then all of a sudden I have to have conversations. It's always the same conversation with a bunch of different people. Very lovely people, amazing that they're interested in what I do, but I need kind of that recharge time for me personally. So I'll usually kind of lead the conversation in the meeting, the first meeting. It feels a little manipulative, but I basically just say like that we're happiest if it's myself in a second to just have a small vendor table off in a corner somewhere. And most of my couples, once they hear that, they're like, oh, okay. And they now picture that as their wedding day. Rather than if you leave it up to them, they're gonna fit you in the floor plan somewhere and you're gonna be sitting. Sometimes you sit with some cool people. Sometimes you end up at the kids' table. So that's why I like to kind of put that image of small vendor table in their mind early on. And I do my best to keep that vendor table inside or at least within audible range of the room. So if we're outside, I want to be able to kind of hear if somebody gets on the mic for a speech. I'll have the organized list of like, okay, there's gonna be 2 speeches here in that final document. But on the wedding day, sometimes things just don't go as planned, or if they have a coordinator, sometimes they don't come out and tell you if you're in a far room. So do your best to sit at least within a decent range of the room so you can get in there if anything is happening. Then next, after all the events have happened, I wanna make sure that there is an end time for photography listed there. So that, again, make sure that you're on the same page of this, that if you said, hey, I'll be there for 10 hours, make sure that they know that at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. that you're leaving. Sometimes there's going to be a surprise kind of sparkler send-off and they won't have thought of the fact that you're leaving before that. So sometimes you can push that ahead and they can do a little sparkler thing at like 10:30 or 11 as you're kind of on your way out. If you're there if it's a friend and you're there to the end of the night, maybe this isn't a problem at all, but in my experience, a lot of the time, the sparklers are maybe an hour after I leave. And it's pretty easy for most of my couples to kind of bump that up to make sure that they get the photo if it is something that they want a photo of. In the 2-week leading up email, I will also just go over the contract and the deliverables and be like, again, I'm there for 10 hours, gonna deliver everything. If you're doing hybrid photo video coverage, your highlight film, you're gonna be doing 3-minute highlight or something like that. Make sure that you have everything in a document or in an email where they can, again, double, triple, quadruple confirm that so that you can be on the exact same page going into the wedding day and there's no unknowns. If you are offering them some preview images or something a few days after the wedding, also put that in writing in that email as well. And maybe also consider putting in your final delivery date. So if it's gonna be 4 weeks from the wedding that you're gonna deliver the final gallery, just say, within 3 days of the wedding, you're gonna have 20 images and the rest will be in 4 weeks, all delivered digitally to your email. So that kind of wraps up that 2-week period. About maybe 2 or 3 days before the wedding, I'll send another email just to be like, hey, just checking in, make sure nothing's changed. Here's my cell number in case you need it. And also if they are checking into a hotel, If you can remind them like, hey, whenever you guys check in, can you just send me an email with your room number so I don't have to go to reception and have them call up, that I can just go to your room. Most couples will say absolutely no problem, and then they'll forget to do that, which is fine. And then go and have a lovely day. You've done all the proper lead up work to this to basically set yourself up for the most amount of success possible. And everyone's on the same page, life is good, and you can now create your images within the best environment possible. All right, my checklist, it's available on the members website if you're interested. There's also a doc version, so if you want to add things, subtract things, you can do that. I would say that overall, these are things that you'll just do. You'll walk into a room and be like, oh, there's a dress hanging, I should photograph that. But it's very nice just to have that checklist that you can just kind of go through and make sure that you do in fact have everything. There's also no official rules to wedding photography, that these are all kind of what I do, but they don't necessarily have to be exactly what you do. I'll also discover that every now and then in a first meeting, a couple will be like, I don't need a shot of my dress hanging, that's dumb. And in those situations, I will usually just not do a whole lot of details. I'll still do some, because even though they might say that they don't want detail shots, if they have nice invitations and I have a few minutes, I think it's nice to document them, but don't let that take time away from the candid coverage. So if a couple really wants candid coverage and they don't want the stuff photographed, don't do a whole lot of stuff photography, but I don't think that there's anything wrong if you see an invitation sitting there to lay it out quickly and grab a photo, or same with shoes. But don't deliver them 45 images of the shoes slightly different with off-camera lighting and natural light and whatnot. So these are the things I look for. Let's go through them real quick. Let's do it. Location exterior, so anytime that I arrive, I want to be getting an exterior shot of the location. I want to get a shot of the dress hanging, dress details, jewelry, shoes, ring shots, anything that they have, so wedding, invitation, other details. When I go into the getting ready space, I basically just ask them what they have, and usually they just like, a bunch of people just bring things to me and I'll be like, great. I always do those photos in a space where everyone can see me as well, so that I can allow them to warm up to the fact that there's a photographer here. And that's the first thing I do. So I don't just barge into a room and start snapping candids. I will do that instead. I'll usually wait until maybe more of the end of the hair and makeup session to start getting photos. Before I start getting a lot of photos, I don't really love to get half done makeup. No one wants to see their wedding gallery open with that. I would prefer to have finalized makeup. So I ask the makeup artist to do a couple of brush strokes at the very end. Any bouquets, flowers that are there. So usually if there's a veil or really anything that maybe a makeup artist or hairstylist is going to be putting in, but if they don't know each other that well, I usually ask for somebody else to kind of help out, at least for the photo. And I know this is kind of fixing the story a little bit, but that's kind of what I do. If they're great friends with their makeup artist or hairstylist and that's who they've known for years, then by all means include them. But if they're not somebody that they see on a monthly or weekly basis, I would say it might be better to get a shot of kind of the mother of the bride or somebody putting in the veil rather than the makeup artist. Bridal party candids, this is, I guess, dependent on what's all going on there. Sometimes it is absolute chaos and I'll grab a few photos, but sometimes there's just not a whole lot to get and you have to get people out of that room as fast as possible. Putting on jewelry, I'll usually, if there's a bridal party, I'll usually try to come up with like a small task for each person. So maybe somebody helps with the earrings, somebody helps with shoes, somebody helps with the dress. Maybe that's a little bit silly, but I like to include everyone. I think it's a better photo. I don't know, I guess it's the same use as just smiling, facing the camera with each individual person, which is also on this list eventually. At this time, I will typically spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes doing photos with just the bride or brides, depending on, I guess, the scene. If it's a same-sex wedding, a lot would typically get together, which honestly makes my life easier. Everything in one spot, it's awesome. But whoever I'm there to be photographing the prep for, I'll do maybe not even 5 minutes of photos with them. It'll be like 3 minutes, usually near a window, put something together really quick, have them look out the window in good light, have them look towards you, and then that's kind of all that I need. Hair and makeup's gonna be the freshest it's going to be all day, especially if it's a hot day. Get that photo early. If there are family around, I will typically get those photos at this point, just quick individuals if we do have the time. If we don't have the time now, these kind of get bumped to the family photo section, which is also fine. If you can kind of plan ahead and get some advanced things before the family session, basically means that my couple can get to cocktail hour faster, which they're usually pretty happy about. This is also something that I do at every wedding. So anyone that's basically there for bridal party, I'll do, if we're there for bridal prep, I'll do a bride with each of the people that are there. Again, if that happens later outside or if the light is better, that's fine also. These are all contingent on bad lighting. I will try to leave that room as fast as possible, so maybe we go outside or maybe we just do it another time. Leaving location, I like to have at least a little bit of a transition shot. It's a bit weird to just like cut from bridal getting ready to ceremony. So I like to have a few transition shots. And then when it comes to a groom side, usually it's a lot more chill. It's like maybe 5 or 6 small details. I don't love the shot of the groom's shoes with socks. I feel like it's kind of dumb, but I still will do that and do that flat lay if I haven't been told that they don't want that at all. Getting ready, usually some cheers shots. Maybe they're drinking some whiskey, whatever it might be. I try to document that, and then I will do the same as the other side. Then I'll photograph the groom with, any family that's there, and then also with any of their bridal party. First look, you're gonna see this more in the first look section on camera, but I like to photograph them both kind of before they see each other, like over the shoulder or something like that. And I will typically do the first look. I will get the reaction if it's a bride-groom wedding. I will get the reaction of the groom turning around. So usually the bride will come up and be like, hey, turn around. And the groom will turn around, I'll get that reaction, and then I'll kind of cycle around. So I'll get lots of candids. Anyone that's there, like creeping through trees or in windows trying to watch, I make sure I grab a few photos of that because that's kind of part of the story that maybe they didn't see. That'll give them a bit of a laugh later, and there always are a few people creeping during first looks. At some point in the first look, they'll both just kind of be like, we don't know what to do now. What do we do? Help us. And at that point, usually I do a few photos of the two of them, a simple smile face the camera. Then I have them walk this way, walk that way, as I spoke about in the posing section. And then if we are going to be going into family photos or bridal party photos at that point, I'll usually do those simple photos with them and then go and get those done. I will typically do kind of like these small 5-10 minute sessions with my couple at multiple different points of the day, that rather than doing a half-hour session at one time, I'll do a 5-minute session here in this location and a 5-minute session here in that location. So I'm not trying to take them away from their day too much, that they're naturally in a spot that's nice. I'll set up some photos, or maybe we'll do some off-camera light, or we'll do something. But the less that I can steal them from the day, the happier I am. During the ceremony, you're gonna see all this, but again, start with that exterior shot, as well as any wedding vehicles. If people are arriving in cool vehicles, make sure that you try to at least get a shot, or if you have a second photographer out there, have somebody there to document that experience. I feel like it is a moment that's often missed, maybe one of the most missed moments in weddings, and it is very nice to have, even if it requires you maybe jogging a little bit to get back to the ceremony. Usually they'll tell you if the car is disappearing and that car is never gonna be seen again, but if it is around, maybe you can stage it a little bit later. I do my best to get every single photo. We won't go too deep into this, you'll see it. I do my best to get a photo of pretty much everything that kind of happens that I would feel would be notable. Different types of ceremonies. If you're at a Greek ceremony, obviously it's going to be different than a typical Christian ceremony, or my ceremonies, which are like 10 minutes usually. So if you're unsure about the ceremony that you're going to be encountering, ask the couple if there's somebody that has like seen a lot of this ceremony and they're able to walk you through a few of the key elements. So if there are any sneaky elements, I've noticed that for a few Catholic weddings, every now and then they just like hide the kiss somewhere. So in Canada, we sign, I think in a bunch of Europe, you actually sign the wedding documents as part of the ceremony. And then sometimes whoever's officiating will just tell them to kiss, and they'll be like behind a table somewhere. And I just like to know that that's coming, so it doesn't stress me out the entire hour leading up to that moment. Post-ceremony, I go through a variety of different images. These are the ones that I will for sure get at every wedding. And the only one that you'll ever be requested, like, where is this photo if you miss it, is the most boring image of the couple smiling and facing the camera. I also do this individually as well. Bridal party, I try to do as many combinations as I can. I will say that I'm noticing less and less demand for bridal party images. 5, 8, 10 years ago, most of my bridal party sessions were pretty intense, that there would be like 15, 20 different combinations. Maybe we'd go to a few different locations. Now it seems like most of my couples, I don't know, maybe this translates to what you're about to do, maybe it doesn't, but I find that most of my couples are pretty happy with a few good clean shots. I would definitely do a few bonus shots that if maybe you're not sure that that was the exact right lighting, you can bring them to a few different locations, but I notice less and less and less demand on the big group photos, and a little bit more demand on the couple photos and the couple actually getting back to the reception so that they can actually see all the guests that they invited. This is my basic family photo list. It's not too extensive. Again, as I mentioned, get your couple to write down all the photos that they want from family, and that will speed your process up a lot. If they don't give me anything, this is usually the list I go through, and I try my best to be very conscious if there are any sort of separations in the family. I will usually either ask that if there's anything that I should be aware of, or I will just kind of pick up on that and make sure that I don't really try to put two people that shouldn't be together. During cocktail hour, my strategy is usually just a lot of candids of guests. I like to make sure that everyone that's there is kind of documented, and this is maybe for a wedding up to about 250 people. Above 250 people, if it's just myself and a second, I'm okay with the fact that maybe not every single person's gonna have a photo, but smaller weddings, I do my best to make sure that happens, as well as kind of wide shots during the ceremony. That's my personal goal, I guess. And then also, if you're comfortable with it, small group photos, so like you can go up and if people look like they're friends and they're having a good time during cocktails, you can ask them to smile and take a picture, or you can go around with a couple, and if they see the couple's off with somebody having a nice time, you can just walk over there and be like, hey, can I take a picture? And I think that those are pretty valuable images. And then also it puts that, at least at cocktail hour, puts it in their head that like, okay, we should maybe like figure out what images we want so that we get them done over the reception and we're not trying to do all these at 11 o'clock at night when our photographer's on their way out the door. Wedding reception, actually the same as the ceremony, that I try to do an empty reception room or ceremony room if possible, and everything that the couple brought in. So if they brought in anything, I'll make sure it's documented. Again, within reason, if they've told me that they don't care about stuff and that they don't want photos of stuff, just the people, then maybe I'll do a couple just like kind of safe shots, wide shot, maybe 1 or 2 images so that they have something. But in that case, I wouldn't go too hard on it. And then just photographing everything that happens. For the first dance, I like to know when that is. It helps me set up my lighting. So I will either use an off-camera light or I will use an on-camera light, or if what's happening more common for me is that a couple will walk in, they'll be introduced into the room, and they'll walk into the room, into their first dance, and it's usually still daylight, and I can shoot ambient, which is really, really nice. And then at some point, the sun will set, and talk with the venue and figure out when you can bore the couple for maybe 15, 20 minutes. Just to have a quick sunset session, and I've done this in parking lots. You can always find good light. Again, light will always be better than backgrounds for me. And if you have nice lighting that the couple's gonna look great in, you can usually do a lot with maybe some shallow depth of field. You can usually figure it out regardless of how terrible the actual surroundings are. If you have nice surroundings, maybe you're out at a golf course, that's great for you. If you're in a parking lot, then it's a little bit harder, but you can usually find some spots. And that is my photo day checklist.
Welcome to the wedding day. I'm your host as always, Taylor Jackson, and today we're on the Sony a7 IV taking wedding pictures. I'm going to begin on the 35mm f1.4 G Master. I like the f1.8 version of this lens, almost equally the same. So if you want to save some money, probably go with 35 1.8. If you want the absolute best and you really want to abuse that shallow depth of field, maybe it makes sense to go for the GM, but I am very happy with both, so no preference in either direction. And after the getting ready section of the day, I will likely be moving into the Tamron 35 to 150, which is my bag back here. It's a Peak Design Everyday Messenger, and it holds everything that I need. My Sony kit is a little bit smaller than my Canon kit because the 35 to 150 is such an incredible lens, and it really replaces my need to have, one, a 70-200, and then also a lot of the other lenses like a 50 and 85. I know I have everything covered. Obviously, bring backup equipment, but overall, I am very, very impressed with that lens. So let's head into the guys getting ready, and then the girls getting ready, and then the ceremony, and then the family photos, and then the reception. It's everything coming up today. What we have here is a sneaky free charging station that does not appear on any maps. Pretty exciting stuff.
For getting ready, I kind of do the same thing on both sides. When I enter the room, if you already know the people you're photographing, it's a little bit easier. I usually don't. So I will just kind of set everything up and start doing some flat lays and start doing a few photos within the view of everyone, so everybody knows that I'm there and they can warm up to the fact that there's going to be a photographer creeping on them for most of the day. Some people are more comfortable with it. Others are, as soon as you enter the room, they're a little bit weird. And I typically will shoot a smaller lens like this in that environment. One, because again, I'd like the shallow depth of field, but also because it is a little less intimidating. Also, the guys getting ready is like 10 minutes. So for the guys getting ready basics, what I do is I walk into that room with my lens set to wide open, which means if it's an f1.8 lens or an f1.4 lens, I am set to f1.8 or 1.4. I will do my best to find the best light in the room. Some rooms, like the room we were in today, is very, very challenging, and you actually have to go outside in order to get really anything usable. And for the most part, a lot of the coverage is going to be candid, but you will have the ability to kind of move people within the room. So if there's one good corner with a good window light and somebody's getting a boutonniere put on, have them go into that corner with the good light and get the photo there, rather than just photographing it kind of wherever it's happening naturally. If you've used the link to get the free gift that I have for you, you'll have my shot list for this, and that's typically the shots that I go through in the guys getting ready prep. Obviously there is room for change if there's more people, or if families are separated, or if both sides of the wedding are getting ready in the same spot. Obviously things change, but I would say that this is pretty much my go-to standard list for the most part. In terms of scheduling, I will typically have the guys prep scheduled before the girls prep. This is also assuming it's kind of a male-female wedding where they're getting ready at separate locations. It's usually easier to get to the guys first and do all those photos, and then the girl side is usually a little bit more of a process, or there's more to photograph there, and it's also kind of more of the part of the wedding day, and I can easily spend about an hour on the girls side. Guys side, I would say if I have a half an hour, that's usually fine, and depending on the flow of the day, sometimes the guys will actually get ready and then actually take their suits off and just hang out because I'm there a little bit too early. If you have a second photographer with you, amazing, send them to go do this coverage, and then that way you don't have to have them unnecessarily getting ready. If there just isn't time in the schedule, or if the package that my couple has booked doesn't have the time for it, I am pretty happy to do the guys prep at the ceremony location. So I'll get the ceremony location a few minutes early, and I'll do a few photos, some getting ready photos, a few photos with the family, and kind of all the stuff that I would usually do at a getting ready location, but I will actually just do it at the ceremony. Or in a case like this where the getting ready location is a little bit challenging, I might reshoot some of that, especially if I'm doing photo video coverage, which is a thing. If you're on the member site, you can have access to the hybrid course, but I do photo video coverage as well. And I really like to get those clean getting ready shots. So if I am not super happy with what I captured in the getting ready space with the conditions I was given, I will reshoot that once I have access to better light, likely at the ceremony location. And pretty much all I need for that is just kind of a little tie straightening, maybe some cuffs doing the cuff thing, and then a few individual portraits, maybe smiling facing the camera and then maybe looking away. And that's kind of all I need from the getting ready coverage part of the day with the guys. It's pretty chill.
All right, just leaving the guys. Worked out pretty well considering there was no natural light in that basement. The fake skylights actually worked out pretty well. Now I'm off to the girls, where I think we're gonna encounter a similar situation where it's an older hotel with smaller windows, and I believe most of the decor is pretty dark, so the flash may have to come out, especially if there's a lot of people in the room, in order to get good light everywhere. Let's go. I don't know. What's the segue? Maybe sign up to the members website, get the weekly content. It's so hot today. One more tip is to make sure you keep everyone in the shade and be very conscious when it is a hot day and the guys are wearing full suits. Just be very aware of that, because if you overheat them, they're not really gonna be your friends, they're not gonna be as compliant, and you're not gonna get the best photos on the day. You're gonna be a bit annoying because you're making them in the hot sun, they're not enjoying the experience of the day. And also, business-wise, you won't really get a whole lot of referrals from them in the future. So my advice is always to act as though it is your wedding day, and whatever you would want to do on your wedding day, do that, and try to limit the things that you wouldn't want to do on your wedding day. That's my story for right now.
All right, today the ceremony space and reception space and girls getting ready location is all in the same spot, which is awesome for me as a photographer. I get to park one time. I like having lack of logistics if possible. So this is ideal wedding timeline, one offsite location, and then everything else kind of in one spot. Some of it's over the river, some of it's on this side. This is from my 35mm lens. I enjoy getting as many detail shots as I can as early in the day as I can, but sometimes things just aren't set up.
Gonna go upstairs, do a quick round of details, and then head and see the girls.
So my strategy for getting detail shots is usually I'll go around with a 35mm lens, or maybe a slightly wider lens, or a 50, and then I'll actually go around and do a similar round with my 85. So I'll get two perspectives, and I typically will say that I end up liking my 85 a little bit better, but there is still a time and a place for a wide shot with something like a 35 or a 20mm lens or a 24, whatever you have. I make it a goal to photograph everything that the couple has brought in, and I will do this now, knowing that candles aren't lit and maybe tables aren't completely finalized. And I will focus on the tables that are in good light. So as you can see, the tables in the back there kind of get into that weird mix of incandescent and also window light. the photos right here are pretty much all entirely window light. So wide shots hide that mixed lighting a little bit better, but for close-up detail shots, it's better to get that nice window light if it's available. As you can see there, kind of the fall off is a little bit weird. I'm shooting this knowing that I'm going to come back and shoot this if I have the time. Some venues are able to get into the space when they've lit all the candles and everything is 100% ready to go. Some venues you cannot, and cocktail hour happens in here. So these are kind of my safe shots to have just in case that happens in the future. All right, candles weren't lit yet, but I shot a lot of details, and it's basically just coverage in case I come back and everybody's already in there for cocktails and my second, or I can't get in there before cocktails kind of takes over and changes the dynamic of the room. But also the head table's not set up because the ceremony decorations typically go to the head table. So I basically just shot everything except the head table just for coverage. So heading into getting ready, I know that I have to get a few transition shots, so I get a few venue detail shots, still on the 35mm lens, haven't switched from that all day yet. And I want at least one or two, and sometimes an image like this will end up being the cover photo for the wedding day gallery, so it's not a photo of the couple kissing or something like that. That was a funny license plate. So for girls prep, I feel a little bit uncomfortable showing the behind the scenes of the actual full getting ready process since it's kind of a private thing. What I will typically do is I walk into that room, same as I do with the guys, that I will get all the details that I need to get photos of. Sometimes that is the dress hanging. Sometimes my couples will tell me that they do not want that photo, and please do not do that photo and do not include that photo. And in that case, I know that details are maybe a little less of a priority overall for the couple, but if they do not say that, I will photograph those details. When I come into the room, same as I talked about with the guys prep, I try to stay visible to everyone. It's a weird thing that a new person has emerged and now they're taking pictures with the camera. I don't walk into the room and just start snapping candids of everyone, especially if hair and makeup isn't finalized yet. What I will do is I'll set that dress up, I'll get that dress photo, I'll get the invitations, I'll have a few brief conversations and just kind of warm everybody up to my presence. And my focus is kind of split half on kind of detail product photography and half, or maybe a little bit more than half, on what's actually happening in terms of candids of the day. I'm there, I would say, as soon as you're done with the details, you are in kind of full candid photojournalism mode until the dress comes on, and then you kind of maybe have to pose a few photos to get the best possible images. So I will typically shoot all of this either on a 50 or a 35, and that lens will be wide open, unless given a reason not to. Maybe in the case of shoes, if I want to get a little bit more detail, I might stop down a little bit. Most of my candids, or pretty much all of my candids at this point, are all going to be at wide open at f1.8 or 1.4, simply because there's a lot going on in the background, and the more that I can make that disappear, the better. Today we're kind of inversing the process a little bit, where I'm going to be doing the getting in the dress photos after the first look with the bridesmaids, because we're in kind of a small room here. And this is the first look that it happens sometimes. I'm going to say it happens 5 times a year. If I photograph 50 or 60 weddings, it's going to happen about 5 times a year. And it's just a nice little candid photojournalism moment that you kind of maybe force in a little way, but it's a nice to have. So now I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to do the getting ready photos. One time that I will step in for sure is to kind of override any bad lighting. So you'd think near the window would be good lighting, but the lighting is much better here. So even though I'm kind of limited with where I can actually go and I kind of have to shoot around the bed, the lighting is much nicer there. And again, nice lighting makes people like the images of themselves a lot better. And overall, they're going to be happier with your photography. So you have the checklist of the photos that I'm looking for here. Again, sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't. I'm kind of there, especially with time constraints. Typically, we're running, maybe not behind at this point, but we're pretty close to exactly where we should be, which means no bonus time. I'm not able to take everyone outside to get a few photos, so I know I'm going to do those after. And what I will get for sure is a few bridal portraits, usually kind of smiling facing towards me, and usually one facing out the corner towards the window there. So today we're headed towards a first look. We're going to do some of the photos before the ceremony, but if there is no first look and we're rolling right into the ceremony, I kind of hang out and I'm just in full photojournalism mode, and I'm just documenting what happens. I'm trying not to be obtrusive, and I'm letting, as you can see, I'm shooting kind of over my chest there from the screen, and I'm really just trying to be a fly on the wall at this point and document what's happening. All right, moving into first looks. What a first look is the first time that the couple sees each other. Reason they might want to do that is to do a lot of the photos before the ceremony. So if they really want to be part of their cocktail hour and hang out with their guests, there's a pretty good chance that they will tip in the direction of doing a first look. It's a bit of a candid or a forced candid photojournalism moment, and It's a bit weird for a few seconds, but it is overall a nice moment, and it's also nice for just calming of the nerves as well. So today, up until this point, I've been on a 35mm lens. A 50 definitely could have also worked throughout this getting ready. I probably wouldn't go much wider than that for the at least the getting ready situation, because there's kind of a lot in the room, and the less I can include, kind of the better image overall. I am now switching to a longer lens, my 35 to 150 Tamron. You can also switch to a 70 to 200 if you want. The reason I do this is to stay a little bit out of the way. An 85, maybe I'll mention an 85, used to be my go-to for these. I stay out of the way as best I can because I don't really want to be interrupting the moment. So if I have lots of zoom and I'm able to kind of zoom around the scene rather than physically walking around the scene and maybe distracting the couple from what's going on, I want them to, as best they can, forget the moments being documented there. So longer lens definitely comes into play at this point in the day. And there's a few images, the images are on the checklist as well, the few images that I want to get. And you know what, let's just go to the first look. All right, those few images that I want to get is typically one, again, in the case of a bride-groom wedding, typically one of the groom kind of facing like this with the bride kind of over her shoulder. And then I will pivot to go get the groom's reaction. Montana, my second photographer, is here now. She had a delayed start and she gets to go home a little bit early today too, which is nice for her. I'm always after the reaction shot right there. I will get that, make sure that I have it. And then I will be switching my side and going over and getting a few reaction shots of the bride. I try not to prompt too many things within this moment. I do my best to set it up and kind of tell them like, hey, one of you is gonna be facing this way, the other one's gonna come up and tap you on the shoulder and you guys can just have a moment. And typically something will happen. Either they'll have somebody turn around or they'll do a little thing on their own. It'll be nice to document. Then they'll also usually have a little talk. They'll talk about what's been going on in the day. If there's any problems that need to be solved, they'll usually talk about them at this point. And I don't interrupt them. I don't prompt them with anything. And I just let them have this moment. Typically, at some point, they'll make eye contact with you and be like, now what do we do? And at that point, I usually have them either smile and face the camera or go for a little walk towards me. And honestly, these moments within the wedding day are some of the most genuine, even if it is kind of that weird forced candid photojournalism moment. Some couples will want to go for a tour of the reception space. Sometimes the decorator wants this reaction captured as well. This is also a great time to actually do photos with the couple in the reception space, because this is kind of the last opportunity that schedules align that you can kind of be in this space with your couple. Because as soon as cocktail hour starts, that kind of just becomes impossible. And especially with a couple that wants to do a first look, I don't want to take up too much of their cocktail hour. So the more that we can do now, the better. The other benefit of shooting within the reception space is that it is typically a covered space, which is nice. So you're not photographing in the bright sun like it is right now. And we're going to talk a little bit throughout this wedding day about how to troubleshoot when it just is a full sun day and the sun is at its highest and you're forced to do the photos within that time. One of those hacks is to bring them inside, whether it's in the ceremony space or whether it's in the reception space. You usually have some sort of indoor covered option at most weddings. For posing tips, there's a posing section that we've already covered within this video, but I would say overall, just find a few things that you aesthetically really like and replicate them in the beginning. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. The way you're going to replicate it is going to be different from the inspiration shot. Maybe one word of caution would be don't replicate shots from the venue that you're at. So don't look up the venue on the internet and find the shots you want and do those exactly, because I do feel like that's too close to copying. But if you find a pose that I did and you want to do a similar pose, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Now moving into the ceremony, I remain on my Tamron 35 to 150 and I'm in photojournalism mode here. One of my side quests in the wedding day is to make sure that I document everyone that's there, at least in one photo. It doesn't have to be like a straight candid like that last one, but I want to make sure that everybody's represented. And when I'm in a space with lots of people and good light, I really try to capitalize on that. Now we're headed to a space with soon to be lots of people and not the best light. It is, any light is usable and you can find a way to make it work. But overall, this is a pretty challenging lighting situation. It's also really, really hot today as well. I'll do this the same as the reception, that any details that have been brought in by the couple, I will make sure that they're documented. And I'm also shooting this wide open on this lens, f2 to f2.8, so it's a variable aperture, but I'll either be at f2 or 2.8. Here we are in the trees, because it's the only piece of shade. Also camera bags in the shade so you don't overheat things. Cameras these days have a tendency to overheat. One of the reasons I like having a second photographer is because you can kind of hang out and shoot over each other's shoulders, and it's a little less obtrusive to the scene than just me just obviously roaming around just snapping candids at people. I don't know. I feel like the guest experience is a little bit better, and they see some photos of themselves and they're like, wow, I didn't even know that there was a photographer there for that moment. At this point, I will usually go find whoever's officiating the ceremony, and I will talk to them basically about the ceremony and make sure that there's nothing that's going to be surprising. And I will also just kind of get them to give me a high level overview of what the ceremony is going to be. Today, it's just going to be a quick 15-20 minute ceremony, but if you are getting into a space where you know the ceremony is going to be a lot more intense, that there are a lot more elements and moving parts to it, make sure you kind of have a better idea of what that is going into the wedding day. The couple will also usually tell you like, hey, go talk to Jimmy. He'll walk you through the entire ceremony. And usually that friend will be incredibly helpful. This is also something you can talk about at the first meeting as well. If it is a more complex ceremony, it's nice to have that, to know that there's somebody that's going to be able to help you out and kind of tell you what you need to know. And also specifically within that church or that place of worship as well. So I'm shooting on manual mode here, but you could very easily be shooting on aperture priority with auto ISO enabled. I would probably recommend that. For everyone coming down the aisle, they're in good light. So this is good light. They're getting nice bounce kind of off the wood back at them, filling in shadows, and it's nice. I know that when everyone gets down to the end of the aisle and they're looking back towards the sun, that light is going to be not so good. So I'm doing the best I can to get all the images that I possibly can while they're in good light. And then I am just basically hoping for a cloud. If it is bad light, I will typically shoot wider. So if the sun was directly on everyone's faces here, I might end up shooting this at 35 primarily so that I get a little bit more of the scene, a little bit more context, and less of a zoom in on just bad light on people's faces. But today, this actually ended up working out for at least half of the ceremony. So as you can see there, you can kind of lift some shadows in post, and you can do what you can, but it's never going to be incredible light. So I know this is going to be good light, so I'll shoot this a lot, and I'll get nice and close up for this. But then as soon as they're at the front, I will go a little bit wider. This is one of the massive benefits of the 35 to 150 as a lens, that I can get so many different variations very quickly. If I was on a 70-200, I'd have to be moving a little bit, or if I was on a prime lens, I would kind of get the same frame as they kind of walk through it. There's no right or wrong way to capture a ceremony as long as everybody looks good and you're capturing the moments. I don't think that your lens will matter too much, but I will say that this lens really does help me out. You have my shot list for what I usually look for in the ceremony. And to kind of run you through it, typically what I'll do is I'll be at the front of the aisle as they're coming down, usually to the left. Bride-groom wedding, I am photographing the groom's reaction of the bride at the end of the aisle. Then I am turning, getting the bride coming down the aisle. And then I'll typically go to the back while everyone's still standing, and I'll get that wide shot that you saw a few moments ago. And then I will come over here and I will get a few close-ups of the bride. If I saw a cloud coming in, I would move a lot faster. I would try to be everywhere as fast as I possibly could. But usually for a ceremony, I want to be respectful and kind of as calm of presence as possible to not attract attention. But if I see a cloud roll in an outdoor ceremony like this, I'm going to be moving pretty quick. And while I do talk about bad light and then I try to avoid it, it still is a ceremony, and the people that are there, the couple do want them documented. So don't just not shoot any images, still shoot the images, but shoot them if possible under a cloud. So as you can see, a little bit wider there, and that looks nice. That looks good. The GoPro shot here looks really nice as well, nice and wide. And the close-up kind of works okay-ish there. And again, I've kind of really smoothed out the shadows in my preset, and we'll talk more about editing in the editing section of this video. So again, everybody here, good light, happy to photograph them, very easy to photograph them. And I am basically looking to get, or anyone that's in the front row, I want more candids of. So everyone else I want to take one photo of and make sure that they're documented in the day, all the guests that is. But the family, the people in the front row, I really want to make a focus on. I want to get a wide shot of everyone in the front row. I want to get a few close-ups. If they're laughing, I want to get different reactions as well. You'll notice that I stay kind of out of the center aisle as much as I can, that I'll get up there in a moment for the ring exchange and the first kiss. But for the most part, I'm kind of around the edges, whether I'm in a church or whether I'm outside like this, it's kind of the same. And when I get to the ceremony, I'll actually kind of make sure that that's possible. So say, for instance, today we were right up against the fence. There's water over the other side there. And if we were right up against this fence over here, I would actually move some chairs and maybe make a second row in the back, or maybe ask somebody if that's okay to do, just to give myself the aisle so I can get up the left and the right sides, so that I can get these shots rather than always being dead center in the middle of the aisle. I personally prefer to stay kind of where the guests end. If I'm in the center of the aisle, I like to be behind that. until I have to get a little bit closer for the ring exchange or for vows or for the first kiss. I always find the ring exchange very difficult to photograph. I'll typically do a close-up similar to this as well as a wide shot. The wide shot, you can't really see that it's a ring, but you kind of get the moment. So don't stress yourself out if you're not getting kind of like the exact action moment of the ring, because it's a bit of a hard one. For the first kiss though, you'll usually have a little bit of a lead up to it. I will do a horizontal frame, then a vertical frame, and I'll photograph a few of the kind of the leading up moments to it and include those as well. I'll then head to the back and get the recessional, and I will typically ask them to kiss. I don't know. It's a nice shot. People seem to like it, and you can just kind of, you don't maybe tell them beforehand, but also you can just tell them to kiss right now. I feel like you're back and you're allowed to talk. So I just tell them to kiss. They do that, and I get a number of different images from the reaction up at the front to walking down the aisle. I get a few wide shots, a few more close up, as well as I'm kissing. And I think that everybody's usually pretty happy at this time and pretty aware of the couple. I find that if I include too many people when they're coming down the aisle at the beginning of the ceremony, there's usually people not paying attention or on their phones. At this point in the ceremony, I feel like everybody's looking at the couple, so it makes it a little bit of a better image. I'll usually, if my second doesn't stay here and grab all these photos, I'll typically grab kind of the family and the wedding party coming down, and then I'll immediately run over to kind of where the couple is receiving everyone for the first time and just saying hi. There's a lot of good candidates to be done there, and if you can make that happen in good light, it's a win. Today, everyone went just straight inside because it's hot out, and now it's cold because they're inside air conditioning. We are going to be doing all the family photos first. So the way that I usually run family photos is I will kind of set up the scene and then I will bring everyone into it. So I'm kind of clearing enough room. I know there's going to be some larger group shots. So I move a few of the chairs, make sure you move them back after. And at this point, I go and grab the couple and I'll have them come in and we'll start our family photos. If you are photographing something that is a symmetrical object, make sure that you are photographing it in a very symmetrical way. Move people over by steps if you have to, because you could move them in post-production, but it's just very apparent if everyone is really shifted off to the left or the right. I do my absolute best to make sure that we are in the best light possible for this part of the day. I don't love to light everything by flash. I guess maybe that statement goes throughout the entire day, but I don't love to light everything through flash specifically now. So if I can do this natural light and I can find a spot, I am the happiest. And all I do is I have everyone line up in a straight line and I make sure that their eyes are on the same plane of focus, which means that they're in that perfect straight line. And I will shoot this usually at f2.8 just to give myself a little bit more depth of field. And that works very well for one line of people standing. If you get a second line behind, maybe you go down to something like f6.3 or maybe f8. But I will typically try to keep everybody in one line while it's possible. Just, I don't know, everybody gets to see their outfit that way. You get to see the full people. And these are typically the images that are printed, so you can actually see them and they're not on a tiny little cell phone screen. As I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, definitely make sure you have a list of family photos, especially if it's your first wedding. It's very, very nice to just have that going into the wedding day, knowing that, hey, we need to do 15 combinations, no problem. Then I always ask them to have somebody else that knows who everyone is help me kind of just get people on deck for the next photo so I can focus on the photography. If I have a second photographer, sometimes they do this job. But usually I would say it's a cousin or just a family friend, and they definitely speed the process up a lot. And it will also stop someone from coming in and starting to direct and set up groupings that could be done over the reception. And this gets the couple back to cocktail hour a little bit earlier. So moving into the bridal party photos, this was, as an introverted person, this is probably the most difficult part of the day. And it's gotten easier the more that I've done it, but in the early days, it was very challenging for me to control groups of people. And the family photos, I feel like it's very, very simple. Everybody knows they stand in that line, they get that photo taken. But for the bridal party, there are kind of more social factors at play. One might also include alcohol. People just get a little out of their mind sometimes. And it becomes a little bit challenging to do your job, especially if you are that introverted personality type. So one fortunate thing that I've been seeing over the past number of years is that the wedding party photo section of the day is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. At one time when I was first getting started, we would have like 3 or 4 hours to do a photo session, and that was just way too much time. You just did the same combinations, and at some point you're like, I'm just doing the same, standing in the same spots, just in different places. I feel like I'm out of ideas. And fortunately, and you'll obviously have to see if this is the truth with your couple as well, but most of my couples are pretty happy with maybe 2 or 3 different photos with the entire bridal party, and then they want to get onto photos of just the 2 of them. So let's go on camera and talk about what I do in real life.
So look at that, a little bit of a win. We got clouds. Clouds are nice for this part of the day. You can photograph in any direction. I'm using the pathway as a leading line here. And the main idea is, like always, make sure people are first in good light. Second, look for backgrounds. And similar to what my shot list looks like, I'll usually start with the very boring smile, face the camera. Then I'll have everyone look at each other and do that fake laugh. And usually it's stupid enough to make people actually laugh. And then I will move to individuals of the bride in this case and each of her girls. And then I will move to full bridal party shots. And I'm getting ahead of myself. Here we go. Simple, easy. Can use the exact same spot. All I'm looking for is kind of a simple background, and I'm hiding the blue porta potties that you can see through the tree there. Very conscious of that. Everything else looks great, but the blue porta potty is a bit bright. So we just kind of assembly line style. Everybody just goes through and we just do a simple photo with everyone. And I will typically do a regular smile, face the camera, and then something candid where they'll just look at each other. I will also do full length absolutely all of the time, and sometimes also crop in for kind of a 3/4 length as well. Now moving in to the other side, we are fortunately here in the shade, and I will keep the light at their back, so they're a little bit backlit in here, and I'll be very conscious to make sure that no sunspots are kind of peeking through and on people's heads or on their shoulders or something that looks a little bit weird. I want very even shade if possible, and usually, even if it's the middle of the day, you can usually find a way to get people kind of in that open, calm shade. And I will do the same thing with the guys as I did with the girls and get those individual shots. Usually it'll be one very serious one and then one more funny one, or that maybe they're squeezing each other's butts or whatever it might be. But usually there's kind of one serious one. I make sure I get that, but then also there's going to be a bonus element as well. And now we move into the actual wedding party photos. So I'll typically do one. If there's sides, I'll have everybody on one side. I'll have everyone line up ceremony order. And I'll start with the basics, so everybody on the same plane of focus, so everyone's eye lines aligned. And some bad news, my GoPro died. I have more battery, we will replace the battery, but I am there first and foremost as the actual photographer, so YouTube content, sorry, it does come second. I will do the photograph of everyone smiling, facing, looking towards the camera. I'll do the same, make everybody look at each other, laugh around a little bit. And then I'll do the second, look at each other and smile at each other, laugh at each other, tell each other stories. And then I'll usually have everybody walk towards me as a group. And I'll do these combinations in two ways. So I'll do it with the regular sides. So if it's bridegroom wedding, groom side, bride side, all just in ceremony order. And then I'll mix it up with usually dresses and suits if it can kind of balance, and I'll do a few shots that way. And after those kind of, I would say 6, I kind of do the same thing, line it up again in a different location, look at each other, laugh, then walk towards me. Once I have all of those photos, I'm usually personally pretty happy, and I will kind of bring this to the couple. I'll be like, I'm happy if you'd like more photos at the bridal party, by all means we can do them, but otherwise let's just do some photos of the two of you. And I would say once you kind of have those combinations, usually people are pretty happy to be like, they can all go to cocktail hour and we'll just finish off just the two of us. Also, because it is your job as a wedding photographer to work within the elements that you're given, today apparently the entire main street area is shut down in Elora here. So there's going to be a heck of a lot of people. The venue is right downtown in those closed streets. You can't get the usual shots that we would get because the street's going to be full of people. So you got to get a little bit more creative. Maybe there's something to be said about putting yourself in a box. I feel like that's the same with prime lenses, that if you're shooting primes, that you're within a bit of a creative box, that lens doesn't zoom. So you will have to make a few different compositions than maybe you would normally make on a wedding day. And I like that. I like to be pushed a little bit, comfortable yet a little bit pushed at times.
So I will get the basic shots that I need, smiling, facing the camera, full length shot, always a photo of them, maybe holding hands and walking away so I can get the full length of the dress. And once I have kind of those shots, I'm pretty happy. There are also shots you can kind of do anywhere as long as you just have a little bit of shade, or you have some nice warm backlight sunset. Or if it looks like it might rain, I start with those shots before doing family or bridal party.
So one thing, if you're shooting wide, everything's going to look very wide out here. But if you walk away a little bit and shoot more telephoto, it compresses the bridge in the background. A lot of focus right there.
I did not step in any of the water, which is nice. And what I was mentioning there, so wide shot, you shoot this photo at 24 and you get really close to the couple. The couple and the rock that they're on is going to be very, very big. But the further you get back, so if you come way back here and you shoot it at something like 100 millimeters, you're getting that really nice background compression where it appears to kind of bring the bridge a little bit closer to the couple, and it fills your frame and makes a little bit better of a scene. And it just looks darn nice like that, I think.
Adds a nice kind of focus roll in to the scene. And I do the same, kind of the smile face the camera. I get that safe shot that the family's going to want. And then I also get some more artistic stuff with them kissing, or that's about all. They're on a rock. They can't really do a whole lot. I can't really move anywhere because everything is weird and slimy and wet. So that's the photo. I'm limited by where I can actually walk. So as you can see, and as I talked about in one of the earlier videos, I split my sessions up. So this was a bit of a longer session because we had to walk down to this rock. But typically I would say I do maybe a 10-minute photo session with the couple at this point in the day and get them back to cocktails. I've already done a 10-minute session with them around the first look, and I'll do another 10-minute session with them at sunset. And that half hour broken up over the entire day feels a lot better, I think, to couples than trying to do a full half-hour session. Also, you get a lot more variation throughout the day, and the prime time that I want to be photographing is sunset, or even around now is actually pretty good. But my prime would be if I could only do a sunset session. That's the only session I could do all day. I would be happy with it, even though hair and makeup might not be 100% what it was. Usually they'll get touch-ups throughout the day, but I would say that the lighting and the general feeling of the couple at that point, that in the afternoon, there's still some tenseness. Usually after a glass of wine, they've sat down for dinner. Maybe the speech is the only thing that they're nervous about. Other than that, they can just relax and be themselves. That's why I find that the sunset session is the best, because of all optically, everything is awesome, but then also emotionally it feels good too. That's a shot of him and his best man up on the rock. They wanted that one. All right, moving into the reception, there are a few lenses that you can choose. I typically would say that if I'm not on this Tamron 35-150, that I'm typically on an 85mm lens. I like the 85 because it allows me to get a little bit of reach in the reception, and I don't have to be over top of anyone's shoulders. So that means that I can kind of get the shot of somebody maybe doing the speech of the entrances and then also turning at the entrances as well, all with one lens and with kind of that like nice shallow depth of field as well that an 85, 1.8 or 1.4 can give you. And an 85 can also allow you to do some, well, let's just go and let's go see it. So one of the benefits of the 85 or something that has more zoom is you can kind of isolate elements. So even though the room is full of people now, I am able to kind of zoom in and get some detail shots and make that background disappear a little bit so it doesn't really seem like there's people in the room. A bit of a workaround when you just can't be in two places at one time. But this is why we get the shots earlier in the day. So you get the wide shots, you get all the shots you can earlier, and then you come in and you kind of get what you can now that everything is officially set up. So I'm going to stay on my 35-150 because it still is kind of ambient brightness in here. If it got darker, I might go down to something that I can shoot at f1.8 or 1.4. But right now, I'm pretty happy with this. I also know they're going to be walking into their first dance, and the 35-150 is going to give me a lot of opportunities to get different frames very quickly and also stay a little bit off the dance floor and out of their way. So my strategy for first dances is typically find the direction that the light is the nicest in and kind of camp out there. So I will let them kind of spin and do things while I'm aimed from the direction of the best light. And then once I know that I have a couple of the shots that I absolutely need, I will start moving around the room and getting some different frames, but I will always get those safe shots first just to make sure I have them. Sometimes the song ends like a minute into the song, or sometimes other people are introduced on the dance floor that you just might not be expecting. So ask the DJ what the plan is, and if there's anything weird, usually they'll tell you. And if the first dance is after dinner, you may have to put a flash on your camera, or you could have an off-camera flash if you want to get crazy. Throughout the reception, I will basically just kind of creep on people a little bit. So a lens like this, helpful, 85 also works pretty well. And same side quest applies, that I want to make sure that everybody's kind of documented. So if I didn't get them at the ceremony, I would like them to be included in the picture now. You can do that by photographing some of the tables a little bit wider, or if you're really ambitious, you can actually go around and do table shots. So you can bring the couple with you and they can do a photo with each of the tables, or you can just walk around your own and get the tables to stand up and smile and face the camera. That's not something that I would typically say that I do at any wedding really anymore, unless it's specifically requested from the couple. And in that case, I will ask them to come around with me. The benefit of the couple coming around with you is that as soon as they appear at the table, everyone will stand up. You have everyone's full attention and it's very easy to get the photo. People also kind of understand the process and they're like, okay, couple showed up. We saw what happened at the table over there. We got picture. We sit back down. So these are some details that I didn't have at the getting ready spot. So I didn't have all the rings, and I think that's an important photo to have. So during the reception's kind of happening behind me. We found this nice little window and we're just taking some photos. Montana's trying real hard to stay out of the way, even though I'm all the way at like 150 and then I'm also into APS-C. As I mentioned in the camera settings video, the C2 button you can see in the foreground there
is my APS-C crop mode, which means as soon as I hit it right there, I'm now into crop mode. So I get an extra 1.5 times on my lens. And yes, I could just crop it in post, but why not get it right in camera? So I've taken 3,000 photos today and I'm still at 31% battery. 3,000 photos. Last photo. Always take a photo before you leave your house to make sure your camera works. There's cards in the camera. And the parents arriving. Beautiful first frame from the day. Usually it's establishing shot today. It's the parents. Is there a Michelin star in there? For speeches, I won't use a flash unless I have to. I find that it becomes a little bit distracting. I also shoot a lot of frames. I've shot, as I mentioned, 3,000 photos, and I'll shoot probably another 1,500, maybe 2,000 images on this day. So I'll leave the wedding with somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000 images. This has also been kind of a 10-hour wedding day, so a little bit longer than my usual wedding day. But if you think you might overshoot a wedding day, you might as well err on the side of having larger cards. Again, 2 cards in my camera, and I do not want to take those cards out and put them in a card wallet. They stay in my camera all day. I go home with them. If we're going into like a sketchy parking lot in the nighttime, sometimes I'll pull the card out and I'll put it somewhere else on my person. But overall, 2 cards, and I never want to take those cards out of the camera. Here we are, sunset session. 5-10 minutes up here, and I am very, very happy. We will talk with the venue staff and figure out when the best time is to pull the couple out. And sometimes that is exactly when you want it to be. Sometimes it's plus or minus 15-20 minutes because the speeches run long. I find that regardless of kind of when you go out at this time, that yes, there maybe is a perfect time that you absolutely want the sun poking through. And that's fine and nice, but sometimes you don't get it, and it ends up being a little bit better. The light cleans up, or you get something that maybe surprises you a little bit. So the lighting tonight, very nice. But if I had my way, I would have probably had them out about 10 minutes earlier, which would have been worse because the sun would have been in that cloud. And I kept an eye outside, but until you actually are able to exit the venue and start the session with your couple, you don't really know how long that's going to take. You don't really know what the sky's going to look like. And boom, cheers. And with that cheers, we were magically transported down to the ground level. I like streets because they just have that leading line kind of built in. And we got more than enough nature today out in the park. And now that there's finally everyone's kind of off the street, we have accessibility to the street, which is nice. And now we can do a nice little photo in front of the venue. So the smile face the camera, boring photo that all the family's going to want. And then have them hold hands and walk towards me and look at each other, smile face each other, love each other, put an arm around each other, maybe stop, do a kiss, and then back to the reception. I don't like to take them out of the reception for too long. Every minute you steal is a minute that they don't get to have their wedding day, that they're taking pictures with you. So the more they can be in the wedding day, the better for me. So I used to use flash a lot at this point in the day. I use it less because you can really get good high ISO performance out of newer cameras. So unless I absolutely need to use flash, I'm not going to be using it. And the primary thing I'm looking for is quality of light. So I want the quality of light in this room to be good. Right now, as you can see in the GoPro, that the lighting is good. Definitely test your camera before your first wedding to make sure that you know what your high ISO performance looks like actually on a real monitor with an edited image rather than just trying to figure out what it looks like on the back of your screen. For me personally, I am pretty comfortable on this Sony a7 IV going up to about 10,000 ISO as long as I know that the exposure is going to be correct. That means that I'm not adjusting the exposure too much in post-production, or you will unfortunately start to see a lot of noise popping up, especially if you have to increase your exposure. All right, Godox V1 is my flash of choice, and it is going on my camera right now. It's the GoPro kind of makes it look a little bit brighter than it is, but I promise you it's quite dark. So I bounce the flash directly above me if I have a white ceiling, or directly kind of above me and behind if there's something that's going to reflect some of that light. I don't love to use direct flash in this case, so you can see the nice bounce flash, how it lights the scene nicely. There's definitely a time and a place for a direct flash if you want that really harsh look, but I think for dancing photos like this, I still prefer bounce flash. If you're interested in seeing more about my off-camera flash process, there is a course called Off-Camera Flash for Wedding Photographers over on the members website. And it is my full workflow when it comes to doing off-camera flash at weddings, which is a bit different than other ways that I see people teaching it. Today we're only really into dancing for 5 songs and then we leave. But if you're there for a long time, you can actually get really, really good at this just with one wedding. Even if you don't know anything going in, you have, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hours of dancing to just experiment with. All of a sudden you leave that wedding really, really talented with flash. So here we go into the last photos of the night. Again, as I mentioned in the timeline, talk to your couple, make sure that if they're doing a sparkler send-off that you're going to still be there for it, or just kind of force a little one like this with just the wedding party. Do a couple photos, have a nice time. There's no right or wrong way to do a sparkler send-off or a sparkler photo. You can do some light painting if you want, or you just keep it simple and just smile and do this. Also, if you're not on the mirrorless train yet, so it's like a very dark environment right now, as you can see by me being at f1.4 and at 8000 ISO, but my eye detection is still picking up kind of weirdly perfectly. So if you're not using a mirrorless camera, you might not have this functionality, but it's a very, very nice thing to have, and it does work into the evening time. And there's been a dress change. So what that means is I'm going to do a few more photos in the same spots that we were at, but at the nighttime now. And that's going to be all for the wedding day. Again, I'm getting those basic shots that all the family's going to want, the smile, face the camera. And then we'll go for a 3 or 4 minute walk kind of around here, and then we'll head back to the reception. If I was using any sort of off-camera flash, I would actually have the scene set up. Maybe I'll set it up with a second photographer or maybe somebody else that I know at the wedding. And I'll have it pretty much ready to go, and then I'll bring the couple in and drop them in. Right here, I can light this well enough just with the street lamps. I think that it looks pretty nice the way that it is. But if you'd prefer that off-camera flash look or the hidden off-camera flash look just with really, really high quality lighting on them, and you have a few moments to set that up, by all means, go and do that. The last active business at the wedding is today. It is the cake cut. And I'm on my 35, and you'll see that I bounce my flash. You can see that it's pointed right up at the wall there. And basically what I'm doing is I'm turning that wall into a nice little softbox there. So it looks like it's very high quality lighting. Meanwhile, it's just my flash bouncing off the wall beside them. And we're done. 2% battery remaining. We took 4,665 photos today. Dang.
So yeah, obviously I have a second battery, but I think that you'll be surprised with how little you need. Charge your batteries throughout the day, keep them charged up. But yeah, mirrorless was always, oh, you're switching to mirrorless, you're gonna need 100 batteries, and I don't find that to be true at all. So that was my wedding day, and now I'm gonna change my sweater. I'm kidding, I recorded this yesterday. We're gonna go into editing, we're gonna edit some images, some different images from today, because I'm sure you're sick of looking at them by now. But first, we're going to go through my culling process and making selects. Let's talk about my backup process and what I do. I'm sure that there's lots of different ways. You could have a multi-array of hard drives. What I do is I use two. So I have a working drive and I have a backup drive. My backup drive, I never get rid of anything. I just leave it all on there. And then I archive that drive. And by archive, I mean put it in a safe. You can also run it through something like RAWZ to make the raw files a lot smaller, or Adobe DNG converter, maybe at the end of the season to make more, like you can probably fit 2 or 3 or 5 seasons on one hard drive with those programs. So what I do is I come on over here, and this is my working drive. So I have Melanie and Michael, and I go to each individual camera and I drag them over. And then I go back to the card and I drag them over again into my long-term backup drive here. As you can see, it's a 6 terabyte drive. And I'll put them individually from the cards. I'm not just gonna copy this and put this on my working drive. I wanna do it individually. And then I'll actually go through on my second card and make sure that I didn't miss anything. So I'll shoot, as I said in the camera settings, I shoot everything to 2 cards. And I just verify that the same file numbers are there. And I'll also go through on Mac and I'll verify that everything is here. Sometimes they show up as kind of those ghost files, and I don't want any of those. I want all the real files. I'm sure you can also use some sort of import process that'll maybe verify the integrity. I find that doing this works well, and I pretty much just sit at my computer and make sure that nothing happens. I am on Mac, obviously, and I've had a couple issues from time to time, not recently, but where Finder would actually error out or something and it would restart while it was downloading the cards, and that would actually cause some of these to show up as not fully written files. So working drive is a solid state drive. It is a SanDisk SSD. You can almost see it. I'm sure you can see the silhouette right now. And I got these on Black Friday and they were on an incredible deal, and I bought a bunch of them. So I use those as working drives. Same deal, I don't really ever format them. I think maybe I'll go maybe 2-3 years before I'll format them. I do have everything backed up online in terms of my JPEGs, my unedited JPEGs from the wedding day. And you can choose where to do that, whether it's Dropbox or whether it's something like SmugMug that allows you to use unlimited JPEG files, or maybe you have an Amazon Cloud backup system, or you're using Google Drive. There's a lot of different places you can put your JPEGs. Mine have been on SmugMug for a very, very long time, since 2008, I think. So I just keep adding there to new galleries, and most of them will give you a yearly rate for JPEG only. Some of them, if you're uploading RAW files, the file sizes are gonna get a little bit out of control, and there may be a paywall at that point. But if you're doing JPEG only, you can probably sneak into some sort of free or very reasonable rate for unlimited storage per year. So the night of the wedding, I'll come over here and I'll grab all the JPEGs. You can either just, if your system only allows you to drop JPEGs, you can just select all of it and it'll just error out the RAW files, or you just do something like this and select JPEG only and select all of them that way. Drag them over to whatever online backup software you're using. And then I will also do that with my video files as well. After that is all going, I will come over here and I will actually build this Lightroom catalog that you see here. We're gonna be talking about actual editing, but I'll also touch a little bit on Imagen, which is the company that I use for my actual image editing as an AI solution. And essentially kind of what happens with them is that I put everything into a Lightroom catalog, I build smart previews, and then I upload that to their system. It will do, I'll call it a 3/4 cull. It'll get rid of anything that has blinks in it, or that it's just that there's a better image or there's a bunch of duplicate images. And then I'll go through and I'll refine the cull from there, and then I resubmit it, and it will edit all of those photos almost exactly as I would. And then I add my preset on top of it just to change the colors around a little bit depending on the venue that I'm at. So yeah, that is my process for backing up 2 drives: working drive, backup drive. Drag from the card to each of those individually, and then verify with your second card, or even drag your second card on top of it to make sure that it doesn't have any files to add. I like to do it just visually by making sure the same numbers are there. And this is what has worked for me. Once I am finished my gallery, as we're gonna show you in this video, I will upload everything, and then I'll have a final gallery online forever. It's not something I'll ever take offline. I tell my couples it's online for I think 3 to 5 years, but I haven't taken anything offline yet. Because myself as a customer, I appreciate when that happens and everything's just online for a long period of time, because I don't have access to all of our wedding photos on my phone, so I like to just go in the gallery and pull them whenever I want to post something. That said, always back up your own wedding photos somewhere too. That's the backup process, and now we're going to go on to selecting images. So I have a joke for you. What's less exciting than culling your own wedding, watching somebody else cull their wedding? That's my joke. I hope you enjoyed it. Culling, you can do in a variety of different ways. You can do it in Lightroom. Lightroom has sped up dramatically, and there are ways to speed it up even more. Or you can use another program. I still use Photo Mechanic. Or you can use AI and some sort of combination of that. Sometimes those systems will have their own culling kind of built into that system. What I do when I'm culling my own images manually and I'm not relying on AI is I will still use Photo Mechanic. I like Photo Mechanic because it is super fast. It's loading, or I guess it's loading the JPEGs, not the RAW files. But as you can see, very, very quickly, Cole's head a bit in the frame there. And this is also from my backup drive, so this isn't even my solid state drive. And that's all I use this program for. Actually, that's a lie. I also use it, it's very easy to adjust dates and time in this as well, which is something that's very helpful if your second camera's a little bit out, or maybe, for instance, you had a second photographer that they just never set up their camera with the proper time. You're able to do that very easily in Photo Mechanic, I find. But my main use for this is to go through and select everything with the number 1. You can also use other numbers if you want, but I select everything by 1. Maybe a blog image, you're gonna flag that as something else. Maybe you're gonna make that a 5. Maybe you're gonna select that in fuchsia, so you know that it's a blog image. But it's also something that when you get rid of all the ones you haven't selected will still appear. So I go through and I select everything with 1, or the red label, I guess, here. And that's what it looks like. Just kind of get everything that I want, all in one nice spot, and then that's it. And here's a photo of a horse, and here's a photo of Cole, here's a photo of a bride with a horse, and a black church. Culling for me is pretty quick. And one tip that I have for you is to cull as close to the event as you possibly can. So I actually will cull and make my image selects the night of the wedding if possible. And I would recommend that you also do that if you're able to, because it just speeds everything up. You can probably do it in half the time. If I come back to weddings maybe 2 weeks after I shot them, I find that it just takes me a lot longer to get through the images. So if I can do it the next day or the night of the wedding, that saves me that time. If you do want to use something like Imagen or Aftershoot to go through and kind of help you cull, it definitely will help out a lot, specifically in the family photos. So I find that it's great other times of the wedding, but for the family photos, for AI software to go through and verify that everyone has their eyes open and give you the one best image from that grouping. I am very, very, very happy to have that help in that specific section of the day, especially if there are a lot of family groups, because it is something that's very intensive for you to be like, you can, like my usual culling speed if I'm going through images is something like, we'll change them to purple if they're my new selects. Look at that sensor dust though. So there's purple, there's one, there's one, there's one. So that's about the speed that I'm usually making my selects until I get to the family photos, and I just slow down dramatically in that part. So it is something that is very helpful, very, very helpful at that point. But the rest of the wedding day, I'm pretty fast enough. So if you would like the help, check out Imagen, check out Aftershoot. If you would not like the help, check out Photo Mechanic. I like it a lot. If you already have the Adobe subscription, maybe start in Lightroom and see if it's fast enough for you. There are ways to speed up your culling in Lightroom. I just kind of enjoy having additional steps, and then also for me to visually be able to basically see everything that I shot the night of the wedding and scroll through everything and be like, okay, family photos are there, photos of the couple are there, reception, everything's chronological where I expect it to be. That makes me pretty happy. And while you can do that in Lightroom, I find that that's just a little bit faster in Photo Mechanic, but you don't have to agree with me. You can find your own software and do the things that you want to do. This is what I use. Photo Mechanic to Lightroom to Imagen to Final Gallery. Onto the editing. All right, editing. I use Adobe Lightroom primarily as my editor, and we're gonna go back to the images we just selected. I refined a little bit, I got rid of a few. I don't wanna go through too many of the same looking images with you, but dragging them over like this, and I click the import button, which is hiding right down here. All right, now that we have everything loaded into Lightroom, I will go through here. You have access I gave you some presets. If you're interested in the intro there's a link down below. And you don't have access to all of these. These are all in the larger preset pack, but you do have a few. I also have a few other presets here from Impossible Things. I was doing some testing earlier. Let's begin. Let's not start there. That one's the hardest image. We'll end there. Let's start easy. Very simple image. This is straight out of camera. This is how it looks. And now I'm going to use my CL preset. So this is the preset that I use pretty much on anything, or at least as a starting point. I will typically, for a wedding day, use either CL if I want this kind of more contrasty version, or TI, depending on skin tones. I have a very red skin tone, and CL kind of pops a bit weird with me. So if I'm photographing someone that's like myself, I will typically go onto something like this and kind of soften and smooth it out a little bit. Otherwise, I'm on here, and then this is my current black and white for this season. So typically when I come into editing, I've loaded everything in, I've clicked into develop mode right here. I will find the preset that I want to use for everything. I like to maintain the consistency of it. I will hold Command A, I will select everything. So rather than adding the preset image by image by image, then I will hit Shift Command S, or Shift Control S if you are on a Windows machine. And I'll select all of these. I'll leave white balance out of it because I might have changed white balance throughout the day, but because I haven't edited any of the images yet, I'm okay to override all of these settings. So here we go. Synchronize. So now everything's gonna have kind of that same palette as a starting point, and a lot of the images will be pretty much ready to go at that point. I've definitely designed my presets to at least make up for my mistakes so that I have to do less adjustments. And I would say that this is kind of the culmination of years and years and years and years of work. And I'm finally to a point where it works pretty much on everything, unless you have a very challenging image like this one here. Look at that, there's nothing there. There they are. So we're not there yet. Let's go through some of the easy ones first. So my editing process, once I've applied my preset, is usually just to drag the exposure up and down until I find the point that I'm happiest. And if I can't get to there with only moving my exposure, at that point is when I start to go into highlights and shadows. I also don't really touch anything down here for wedding photos. For landscape photos, yeah, there's all kinds of options, but for wedding photos, I like to leave things as natural as possible. I think when it comes to editing, wedding photos should be timeless, and if you're doing some crazy editing styles, it's just not gonna look great over time. So the more simple you can keep everything, the better. So if you're seeing those crazy editing trends and you're like, I need to get in on this, maybe do it 1 or 2 times, but don't spend and also save the raw file. If you know you're editing heavy, put that raw file, if it's a portfolio image, put that somewhere else so you can edit it again later if you do get sick of looking at it in that way. And I speak to that from experience. So here we go, we'll just go through a few of the images here. That one looks nice. That one's on a big slant. Here we go. I kind of like the slant, to be honest. So in this case, I'm getting a little bit of haze here, which is actual natural haze, but I'm gonna bring the highlights down a little bit. So to walk you through the sliders here, exposure is just your overall exposure from light to dark. And you can double click any of these at any time. So if you say, oh, I put my highlights in the wrong spot and you wanna go back to 0, you can do that. I tend not to use this contrast too much. What I will do is I will build kind of natural contrast, usually by bringing down the black point a little bit and then maybe bringing up a little bit of exposure. I feel like it does more of a natural thing, at least for my eye. This is also all what I do, so if this doesn't feel right to you, do whatever style of content that you want to exist in the world. Highlights, basically just work with the mostly skies or bright parts of dresses. They bring all the highlights up or down. And if you want to get that, again, that natural contrast going, you can kind of move the highlights around a little bit and find the point that you're happiest with. Shadows, move the shadows. I feel like when you get this, you get that kind of like crappy HDR, high dynamic range feeling, and I don't really love that. So I like to leave it as natural, again, as possible. Whites and black point, I typically don't touch a whole lot. I will set my black point in the preset, and it's pretty rare that I'll be moving that too much throughout an editing session. We'll get into some more advanced local edits in a few moments here. So moving into this will probably just be a simple exposure, and then I've lost a little bit of the sky here, so I want to bring that back just a little bit. And now what you'll notice, you got some things in the background that maybe you don't want in the background. So what you do in Lightroom is you click this button right here, and you do the content aware, remove, and a lot of the time, you can just kind of click it one time and it works. That's pretty close. Now it's not close at all. Now it's close again. So what I did there is I moved my brush to the point that I want it to be, and I used the brackets keys, open and close bracket, to make the brush smaller and larger. And then I just placed it right on the thing I wanted to disappear. I do this a lot for fire alarms and for running man signs in reception spaces. I would say that is my #1 use for this tool. You can also remove anything if there's like people in the background that you wanted to disappear. You could also do it that way. To move into a slightly more advanced feature and a new feature is you can use this masking button here, and you can select just the subject or just the sky or just the background. And if you are working with a really high dynamic range sky, what you can do is you just select the sky here in the mask, and now it tells you that this is sky, and you're actually able to bring down and make local adjustments just on the sky up there. So if you want to balance out the image, if the sky is too bright and the couples, it doesn't look right, you're able to do that. Typically what I do though, is I do the opposite, and I will do a subject mask, so it will select my couple here. Look at that, found them. And you can move the exposure up a little bit if you want. You can also refine the mask because it selected some stuff it shouldn't have. I will typically bump the exposure of my couple up a little bit, and then I will go back here to the main palette, and I will actually bring the rest of the scene down. So you can see how they just naturally kind of pop out of the photo right now, but they don't look too Photoshopped. So that's the original. It's fine. That looks a heck of a lot more professional. And that was just done with a simple mask, making them a little bit brighter and the image a little bit darker, kind of creating a natural vignette around them. Don't overdo it. I feel like this is almost overdoing it, but I'm kind of doing it for the example. I just like to have that little additional pop in there. So again, this one's probably gonna be fixed with just exposure. I don't focus too hard on saving every single sky. This sky is obviously kind of boring sky. I'm not gonna go in and do a sky replace on everything. I feel like when you start replacing skies, especially like landscape photography, do whatever you kind of want. But when it comes to weddings, I like to keep the wedding day kind of actually what it was. So replacing the sky with a wicked sunset and using AI features to make it feel like it's a sunset is cool, but it's not really what it was for the day. So I don't know, maybe for your portfolio, wherever your ethics are on that, feel free. But for the actual couples images, I would say leave it as natural to the day as you can. The old way that I used to do masking was I would actually use a linear gradient, and I would bring maybe the exposure down just a little bit as well as highlights. And I would just drag and drop a bunch of these on there. So as you can see, it kind of brought the highlights down a little bit. And then I would use the M key, so it's the M key to add one of these, and I would just keep doing this over and over again. And I would kind of build my own little vignette here. This is something that I stole directly from my friend Sam Hurd. And then I would kind of balance it out. So if there's a little kind of irregularity, this would kind of be considered a vignette, which is a negative thing for your lens to have, but I kind of like it a lot. Now with subject masking, it's just a heck of a lot easier. So I'm gonna undo all of that because that doesn't look so good. This might also be one that I might do a little subject mask. Because the people are small, I'm curious if it will actually pick them out. Let's begin. Select subject. It's probably gonna nail it, always nails it. Pretty close. All right, now we're gonna just bump the exposure up a tiny bit. The other thing you can do if you wanna hide exposure, or if it looks like you're like, obviously this is an exposure adjustment on a local area and that looks like garbage, what you can do is you can actually bring contrast down and shadows up. So you can kind of modify a little bit like that, and maybe also a little bit of exposure. And that way your edit hides just a little bit more. So there it is. I would be pretty happy with that image. You could also go in and refine the mask because as you saw, it kind of did a little too much kind of in this back area there. But honestly, I'm kind of fine with it. We already did these ones. Here we are, new one. This was almost a scene where the lighting changed enough that I was almost going to go to this preset here if you want something a little bit softer. It looks pretty nice. We have a little bit of a sky, which is interesting. Resist the urge to make the sky crazy, dramatic sky. That's not what we want to see. Because you're gonna hate it a little bit later. Or maybe you'll like it forever. I don't know. I don't know your taste. But I personally, at some point, would be like, why did I edit this image in this way? So I don't know, it's like the Chanel thing. Whatever you put on last on your way out the door, you take off, unless it was your pants. Next image, let's do black and white. Switch things up a little bit. So there it is for black and white. Black and white, you can also do a really, really nice adjustment here. So if you are bumping your exposure up, so somewhere like that. So I'm basically editing this mask for where I want the couple to be. Maybe somewhere around there. Then I'm gonna come in here and do the opposite. So now you can see that it creates that really, really nice separation. So yeah, play around with that if you want or don't. That's cool too. Here we are. So now, I shot this at f16. When my camera is this way, there's no sensor dust. But then as soon as I turn my camera this way, there's all kinds of little sensor dusts. We're going to use those as an example. I'm pretty happy with this image overall. Maybe a little bit of exposure. And we're done. Did a longer shutter speed to get the water kind of blurred out like that. This is a very James Bond photo, actually. I kind of like it. Looks good. All right, so for removing the dust specks, if you have Luminar, if you have access to a Luminar Neo license, Luminar Neo actually has, there's a button for this and it makes it all of this go away. You can embed that into Photoshop, maybe Lightroom. I'm not sure about Lightroom, Photoshop for sure. But it basically just goes through and it just does this. So I've selected this button here, done the content aware replace, and now all my sensor dust is gone. If you're interested in brightening up specific areas, you can come in here and you can get your brush going. And same deal as before, bring that contrast down and shadows up a little bit. And that way you can kind of paint some detail in that doesn't make it look like it's just completely photoshopped and fake. Feels a little bit more natural, at least in my mind here. And that balanced out the image enough for me to be happy with it. This image here, we're getting into blue hour. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the white balance to something that is natural for their skin. My white balance, I'm always basing it on their skin. I'm also, what shutter speed is this? 1/100th of a second. At 35, that should be fine. I was shaking a little bit. It was cold. It was windy. I take no responsibility for the slight blur. I feel like it kind of adds a little bit of skin smoothing that you don't have to add it and post it. It's just kind of done. So an image like this, originally, very blue hour, very kind of boring light. Now all of a sudden it kind of looks a little bit more sunsetty, but you're not just completely forcing it to be something that it's not. An image like this in black and white would also be good because there's just some distracting elements kind of going on down over here that I like. Everything going on all here, but these farmer fields here, we actually stayed in this Airbnb on another trip, but I feel like it kind of is a little bit distracting. So something like that, a little bit better, or you could use the content aware tool and kind of paint out maybe the bright contrast elements that you kind of see over here. But I'm pretty happy with that image, and I will actually crop it in a little bit. So as we talked about in composition rule of thirds, it should never really be like dead center like that. It always looks a little bit weird. Something like that might be a little nicer of an image. Now here we are with the most perfect lighting in the world. I've added my preset and this image is done. You can also maybe see, I feel like you can't do anything better than what naturally happened specifically in this shot for like 5 minutes. Ooh, it grabbed the rock too, interesting. Okay, so I've adjusted them a little bit and I'm gonna bring the overall exposure of the scene. It looks like I brought in an off-camera flash and I lit them with an off-camera flash. I did not, they were quite far away. This was shot, I guess at 30, everything's at like 35. I guess that's a note to you. If you go to Iceland, bring a 35. I feel like the composition's a little bit wonky. I'm gonna see if I can kind of fix it with this. And, it's better, but not perfect. So an image like this, I might even edit for the actual overall image. So I kind of edited for everything that's happening in the scene. And now I'm going to go in, I'm gonna build that subject mask, and that's okay that it selected that area there. You know what? It's not cool. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna kind of brush out what it did. Again, using the brackets tools, and I don't want that. And this kind of lit up a little bit too much. Anything that is in red is being affected by the mask. I think that's good there. And I'm pretty happy with that image overall. Next up, this one looks nice as is. Don't need to go and do anything crazy for masking. Also, if you notice, depending on the lens that you're using, you can also enable profile corrections here, and it will change. So as you can see there, it got rid of kind of this natural vignette this lens has. I personally like the natural vignette. I like it better without profile corrections, but that is this lens specifically. There are other lenses that are just a bit weird when they load into Lightroom without a profile correction, and you need to do that. But what it will do is it basically will get rid of any of the weird distortions that maybe a less than perfect lens would make, or even, I guess, new, very expensive lenses. You can also use transform. So if you notice that things are just like a little bit too distorted in a weird way, you can fix it yourself. Or maybe we'll use this as an example. If your buildings aren't standing up completely straight and you hit auto, usually it will kind of stretch it. You saw how it skewed it just a little bit there. Usually it will make lines a little bit more perfect for you. So if you're shooting, say for instance, against, maybe you're doing family photos and in the background there's a fireplace and you're always on a little bit of a slant, if you use the auto feature, it should usually fix that for you. A few more images here. Crop tool, something I use quite often as well, just to straighten all my images because I'm always just a little bit off. This is the tool of the red eye correction. Hopefully you're not getting too much red eye in your photos. I don't know why that's a standalone tool there, a little bit crazy. And the second from final image, I'm gonna add a little bit of warmth to that, and we're gonna see, subject-wise, what it's gonna do. Oh, that might be pretty good. So, gonna add a little bit of warmth. I felt that the skin tone was still a little bit cool. It was a bit of a weird part of the day. This is starting to look a little bit too Photoshop for me, but it's an example of kind of what you can do, maybe somewhere around there. Maybe I'll come in and I'll brighten up the ground so you can actually see the ground exists there. So I'm going to create a new mask here and I'm going to do brush. You can also hit the K, the letter K if you want, and make it a little bit bigger with the bracket tool and come down here and just add a little bit more detail to the grass. If you start adding too much and you start bringing up things that are almost a pure black, you're gonna get a lot of grain. So something like that is a little bit better, and maybe a little bit of face light there too. Now I'm gonna bring it down a little bit more. I think I'm happy. This thing bothers me, so I'm gonna get rid of it quickly. If you notice that your images do have a little bit too much grain, that you're doing something and all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's a really, really grainy image, you can actually come down here and you can get rid of that grain. You can actually come down here into noise reduction under detail, and you can get rid of some of that grain. So you can do noise reduction, you can season it to taste. I find that most of the newer cameras, and that means anything made after like 2016, I am pretty happy with on a wedding day, as long as you're shooting it correctly in camera, and that usually means using the correct lens. So don't try to shoot an f4 prime in the dark. You're not gonna get images that you like, and it's gonna introduce grain or it's gonna look overlit. But if you're using a 51.8, all of a sudden that image is probably gonna look pretty fine. And it's not gonna be too grainy, or if it is grainy, the grain's not gonna be distracting. I think as photographers, we have a much lower tolerance for grain and for noise than our customers do. You can also make things black and white. If you're ever like, oh man, that's the most terrible grain I've ever seen, when you make it black and white, you're like, oh, that looks nice now. All right, let's come over here into the challenge of the day. I knew this was a challenge when we were shooting it. I was like, how do I shoot that? I want to expose for this. I want to get a little bit of that nice light, but I know if I just crank the shadows right now, it didn't actually look that bad. So we're definitely going to need some noise reduction here. Come down here. You got to see what it does there. Well, no, I can't do it before and after. But this cleaned up kind of in the rocks here, and it's starting to look a little bit better. So I'm going to come in here and crop, straighten. Starting to look pretty nice. Skin tone back here is looking a little purpley, a little blue. So I'm going to warm the entire scene up a little bit like that. And that might feel like a little bit too much warmth for you, but that's for you to decide. For me, I think that feels pretty nice. So the highlight slider here is obviously doing a heck of a lot because there's just such high dynamic range in this scene. And something about there I think I'm going to be pretty happy with. And then I'm going to see if it'll actually select my couple in a mask. And it did it. Wow. And you only get the wedding dress. You didn't get the selection here, sadly. But that's enough. It makes it pop a little bit more. And overall, I'm pretty happy with this image. I might go through here and clean up a few of these distracting details out there with the content and wear fill. But other than that, I'm happy. Another challenging one. So as you can see, lots of rocks and lots of detail here. I'll come in and I'll kind of figure out what I want the entire scene to look like. So maybe somewhere around there for exposure that I have enough detail down here. I'm fine if this kind of disappears because this isn't really the focus of the image, and if it naturally vignettes into the scene, that's great. I'll bring shadows up to about there. And now I'm gonna work on the highlights because I want a little bit of that sky because it's kind of a nice pinky color. And I feel like I'm pretty happy with it as it is there. Maybe do a little rotate. I'm just trying to straighten the horizon there. And I think I'm happy enough with that image. Then I have the zoomed in version. So this is showing the power of the Tamron 35 to 150. You can get that shot, and then you can get this shot standing almost in the same spot. I think we moved a little bit. Lighting here, bit of a challenge currently, that you're getting kind of this the natural light kind of bouncing off of her dress into his face. So there's a little bit of different colors kind of going on. That would mean for me that I like this image a lot. So I would probably be doing a black and white version of it. What I actually do is I'll give them the color version and the black and white for everything. So you can come in here and you can create virtual copy, or you can hit Command, Control, depending on the system you're on, comma, or I guess apostrophe. And when you do that, it also makes an additional image for you. So it just copies it, whatever you're doing, the one that you hit the button on. And I would do a black and white version of it for them. And I always want to deliver the color in case they're building an album. It's very weird to have like 3 color images from the same scene and 1 black and white. So I want to give them the color in case they're doing that, or in case they just like color images better. But in my eye here, I think the black and white is a better image overall. I feel like the color is just a little bit too much going on. Black and white simplifies it, and I like it a lot. And that's it. That's all for editing. I don't really do anything too crazy. It's a lot of small white balance adjustments. If you're ever in a spot that you don't know what the white balance is, use this dropper tool and drop it on something that's gray or something that's white or something that's black. And usually it'll give you a pretty good starting point. I find that it's maybe 85% accurate, so I'm still gonna go in and I'm gonna change things a little bit. I also prefer a slightly warmer image overall, and that doesn't have to be for you. If you like cooler images or you like dark and moody, that's fine. I would say that this is kind of my style generally, and I do my best for my images to kind of be this rough exposure throughout the entire day. Now, next, if you're interested in something even more exciting, I got thing for you in editing, and it speeds your life up even more. So let's head to that. So if it's your first wedding, I 100% recommend that you go through and you did what we just did. You figure out how to edit your images, but there is a little bit of a crutch that you can now rely on in AI editing. So you can just run all of your photos through a technically inexperienced editor, someone that's significantly more experienced than I am even. And how you do that is you come on over, I'll put a link to this down below. It's called Imagen, and if you use my code, I think you get 1,500 free edits. So you're able to at least test this, or that's probably 2 or 3 weddings for you to at least get started with and see if you enjoy it. If you're making this a career, awesome, keep using it. If not, that's fine too, and I'm happy you've made it this far. All right, here we are in Imagen. It is AI editing for your photography. I'm going to close Lightroom. That is one of the requirements, that you have this catalog. So we're going to edit the images that are on the timeline here. And within Imagen, once you've signed up, you can do your culling here, or you can come over here and you can edit with warm skin tones. So this is, you can use any of the talents that they have. There's a lot of talents, I believe. So all the talent profiles are here. You can basically see and look and figure out what you like, and then you can edit based on this. So the one that I like the best seems to be warm skin tones, and I use to edit. And then I just upload the catalog that I just did. And here we select the images that were within that last Lightroom catalog we were just working on. And I'm gonna have them straighten. I'm gonna have them subject mask as well. So they're gonna do that where they select the subject for me and they maybe bump the exposure a little bit. I'm gonna call it test 1 because test was already taken. Here we go. You start uploading and you'll see the little DNGs being built down here. So basically what it's doing is it is opening up DNG converter, making smaller versions, sending those versions to Imagen. Their server side, Imagen is working with it and editing your image. And you don't have to send the full raw size, which means that I would say an average wedding on medium okay internet takes me about maybe 15-20 minutes to upload in total. So because the subject mask is currently a beta feature, it'll take a few moments longer. Usually you can edit an entire wedding day in 10 minutes. Actually shorter than that, I think it's 1,500 images in 10 minutes. So if you have a 700 image wedding day, which is typically around what I deliver, that means that you are getting your edits back really, really darn quick. You get that notification when the images are ready. You download to review, you download your edits, and now it's downloading just the XMP files, so it's downloading just tiny little kilobyte files. And then you get to open your final gallery and see the final images. So while we just did the full editing, this overrode it all. So this is the original, this is the edit. Darn, that looks nice. Next up, very nice edit. Let's go to the original. There it is. If you decide that, so there will be a feature, probably by the time you're watching this, that you can actually do full profile adjustments. So if you notice that everything is maybe a little bit too bright for your taste, you'll be able to dial that back. For now though, if that's ever a problem, you can go over here into library mode. So you select everything, hit Command or Control A, and you can do global adjustments. So if you know everything's going to be a little bit too bright, you can move the exposure down. And if it's still a little bit too bright, you can move the exposure down. Same goes with temperature. If everything's a little bit too cool or everything's a little bit too warm, you can modify that easily, global adjustments here. Whereas if you are in the develop module, when you synchronize everything, you're synchronizing with exact settings. So if I synchronized all the other images with this, it would give these settings to all those images, whereas you can kind of bump up and down a little bit in the global adjustments or in library mode. So as you can see here, Imagen has gone in and has built this mask, and it's made some small adjustments to just the couple. What I don't love yet, so I edited with that profile, but it doesn't have my colors. So you can build your own profile. If you have, I think, 3,000 images, it'll build your own profile. It'll edit very, very similar to you. However, I found that my editing was a little bit inconsistent. So my profile is fine, but this warm skin tones profile is a heck of a lot more accurate. So I come over here and I will add my CL preset to one of them. I'll select everything. I will hit Command Shift S, and I'll get rid of all of the things so that I don't want any of this to override what Imagen has done for the edit. All I want is my tone curve, my colors, and the color grading to copy over. So now when you go back to this image, it's my color palette, but the edits from Imagen are still on there. So that's how I use Imagen. It is incorrect how I use it, but it works really well for me, and I find that it's the most accurate to what I want my final images to be. So if you're interested in that quick life hack and just getting all your images edited like a professional very, very quickly, this is the way to go about that. So check that out. There's a link down below to get in on that, and then you just have it and you're a professional editor in no time. But please, if this is going to be your career, please learn how to edit, develop your style yourself before relying too much on the AI editing tools. But this is a tool that's available to you if you choose to use it. All right, now on to actually uploading your gallery somewhere. So there are a lot of different options to actually upload your gallery. First, you gotta export your images. So we're gonna do a quick little export here. We're gonna call them tutorial images. My export settings aren't too crazy. I do quality 81%. People have done tests between like, I think 68% and 100%, and you can't really visibly tell a lot of difference. I'm happy with 81%. And I think everything else I just leave as default. I don't change anything else. Then I hit export. and then I'll go to a folder. It's gonna take a minute because right now I'm encoding a lot of videos. All the screen records you've been seeing are now encoding in the background, and it's gonna make my Lightroom, which is already a slow program, incredibly slower. We're not gonna let it. We're not gonna give it the satisfaction of exporting images. I've already done this. This has already been done. This is like a cooking show. It's all done. Here we go. Let's come on over here. So this is a company called Focal. I'm a part owner in Focal. If you're interested in getting a website built, we have an incredible AI website builder that's just nuts. So it just came out a couple of days ago now, and you can build a website with your images in no time. So if you want website packages, copy, everything done for you, bookfocal.com/Taylor. It's on the screen right now. And it's also in the description, and it'll just build you a nice website. It also comes with all this backend. So you have your bookings, you have your contracts, all your financials. If you want to connect Stripe to take payments, it's fully crazy functioning, and it pretty much compacts all of the random subscriptions you would have as a photographer to like gallery software, as well as a CRM, which is kind of this client relationship management side of things, to the website that you're going to need built, and all of that just all comes in one spot. So galleries, here we go. We're gonna call it Draft Gallery 1. So beautiful. And you can drag and drop, or you can come over here. We're gonna use some different images. We're gonna use some images from Thrive. Here we go. Upload. 63 images uploading right now. And we'll give I take so few horizontal images now. Which one do we want? Let's do this one. That one is the image that we want. Boom. Not the best expression. I pulled these while I was doing an editing demo at the conference called Thrive in Brighton, UK. Or no, this was Glasgow. We were in Glasgow. And here we go. I uploaded a few of the images. I didn't upload everything. But as you can see, these are all verticals. Let's go find a better gallery. Let's go check out Serena and Mike. So here we go, previewing this gallery. You've uploaded all your photos. You select an image for your main header here. You can download the gallery. You can share the gallery. And everything, it's just basic and simple. People can download the images, they can download all of the images, and it's just fast and quick loading. So if you're interested in that, head on over to bookfocal.com/Taylor. Build a website if you want, or just get the backend or the galleries. Whatever you want to do, there's a heck of a lot in the system. And boom, now you have simple gallery. Easy, breezy, beautiful. Thanks so much for going through all of this course with me. I appreciate you being here, and I hope that this has unveiled some of the mystery of photographing your first wedding. And you've probably put more effort into learning about shooting your first wedding than 99% of professional wedding photographers now. So you are much more prepared, knowing everything that you've learned, than most people shooting their first wedding ever. My first wedding, I had not been to a wedding. I showed up and I had to learn the entire flow of the wedding. Now, hopefully that's been unveiled a little bit through the behind the scenes footage. And now if wedding photography seems like it might be a pretty interesting career for you, I have a lot of content on the members website. So start with Book More Wedding series, as well as anything else that you find interesting. There is so much content over there, and I do believe it to be the best value in all of wedding photography education. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again wherever it is I see you, hopefully in the members website. Go through there, 100% money back guarantee. So if you get it and you don't love it, let me know, send your money back. But there is so much in there, including all the downloads. You can get your contract and everything. So I do highly recommend it. Give it a shot, see if you like it. Until next time, I'm Taylor Jackson, and goodbye.